Shabbat Shalom and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm looking at the WhatsApp. It's still counting down. I'm still on 4.
Okay. There is a time delay then, or?
That's what it looks like. All right. So, how's everything going?
Well, it's fine. Everything is fine. As we can say, it's fine.
Shabbat Shalom, Rich. I just saw you there. So, this week we have Parashath Shemoth. And that is going to be a really interesting parasha. So we'll begin at chapter 1, verse 1 of the book of Exodus. And then we'll read through to chapter 6, the first verse, hopefully, if we make it that far. Depending on the commentary. But I'm going to wait just a few more minutes before I get started, just so that people can join in if they want to join in. So about 5 minutes after, I'll go ahead and start. We're at 2 minutes now. Shabbat Shalom, Shaya. Thank you for joining us today. So it's pretty cool. I'm not sure if you guys can actually see what I'm seeing, but it shows me who's watching and where they're watching and where they're posting from. So it's pretty cool. I like to watch the audience grow. I think it was maybe the Shabbat before last Shabbat. We actually had about 10 people in the audience, so that was pretty cool. So I'm going to do a quick sound check. I've got my Bluetooth in, but I shouldn't be going through my Bluetooth. I should be going through my computer microphone. So if the sound is okay, just type a 1. If it's terrible, type a 2. Now I know why it takes so long to see anything in the comments, because there's a delay.
I can hear you very well.
Okay. Thanks, Ricky. Well, we're actually on Streamyard is the name of it. And hang on, I'll send you a link. I'll post a link, and you don't have to download anything if you want to join the live stream. There's no apps. This takes you directly to the backstage, so I'll have to let you in when you get here. But if you want to join and speak with us or read or have questions, disagreements, say I'm crazy, it's fine. Just click the link and come on. I'll let you speak your mind. So it's now 5 minutes into the broadcast. I'm going to begin the parasha. So we're reading today, beginning with Exodus chapter 1, first verse. وأيلي شموث بني إسرائيل حبائين متريمة إث يعقوب إيش وبيثو باء. These are the names of the children of Israel, the ones that entered Egypt with Yaakov, each man and his house who entered. Verse 2, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Reuben, Shimon or Simeon, Levi, and Yehuda. Verse 3, Yisachar, Zebulun, Uvinyamin. Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin. Verse 4, Dan wa Naphtali, Gad wa Asher. We have Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Verse 5, وَيَهِي كُلْ نَافِشْ يُطْعِ يَرَخْ يَعْقُوب شِبْعِينَ نَافِشْ وَيُوسَف هَيَا بِمِصْرَيْم. And so it was every person that came from the loins of Yaakov. They were 70 persons, and Joseph was in Egypt. Joseph didn't come with Yaakov, he was already there. Verse 6, وَيَمُوتْ يُوسَف وَخُلْ إِخَاهُ وَخُلْ هَدَوْرْ هَهُ. And so Joseph died along with all of his brothers and that entire generation. Shabbat Shalom Ephraim. Verse 7, Uvnei Yisrael paru wa yithrasu wa yirbu wa yatzamu b'me'ov wa temalei ha'aretz otham. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and they swarmed about. And this is really interesting because this is the same verb that they used in Genesis chapter 1 when it talked about the fish swarming in the sea. So they swarmed about, and they multiplied. And now this word wayatzamu, and they became strong. Now this is mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 26. And there, real quick, read it so that you can understand what's going on. So, as I've said many times, the Pesach story begins with the children of Israel selling Joseph, or they weren't actually the ones who sold him, but putting him in the well that he would get sold into Egypt. And it ends actually when you bring the first fruits offering to the Kohen. So this is chapter 26 of Deuteronomy. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Deuteronomy 26 verse 5, it says, وَعَنِيثَ وَأَمَارْتَ لِفْنَي أَدُونَي إِلَهِكَ أَرَمِي عُبَيْد أَبِي وَيَرِدْ مِصْرَيْمَ وَيَغُورْ شَمْ بِنَفَي مِعَات وَيَهِي شَمْ لِغُوِي غَدُول عَتْسُمْ وَرَاv. And it says, and you shall answer and say before Adonai your God, my father was a perishing Aramaean. And he went down to Egypt, and he resided there with a few men. And there he became a great nation, mighty, and numerous. Atzom. This is the same word we're using here when it says that they became strong or mighty. They had strength. And not just a little bit. It says which means really great. And the earth was filled with them. Verse 8. ويقوم ملك خداش على مصرين أشر لو يدع et Yosef. And a new king rose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to mean he doesn't know who Joseph was, but it could be that he didn't recognize the accomplishments that Joseph had done or his position. Verse 9. ويومر العمو هنا عن بني إسرائيل راب وعصم منه. And he says to his people, look, the people of the children of Israel, they are many and mightier than we are. So not only were they more populous, they outnumbered the native Egyptians, but they had actually more power and more strength. And we have to understand too, this new king who didn't recognize or didn't know Joseph had a problem in that during this drought that we read about in Genesis, all the landowners of Egypt became slaves to Pharaoh, to the king of Egypt. The only land that wasn't affected really was the land of Goshen, which is where the Israelites lived, and that happened to be where the priests were. And so while the rest of the Egyptians were under a 20% tax, the Israelites weren't, and neither were the priests. And they ended up being the shepherds. They kept the property of the Pharaoh, who actually installed Joseph basically on his own throne. And so the Israelites, being the family of Joseph, were more than likely very close to the political power of Egypt. So this is what's going on now. So it's not just that you had a bunch of poor shepherds that are breeding like rabbits. That's not what's going on. This is a political as well as numerical situation here. Verse 10. So I got some people coming in. So I don't know if they want to ask questions or not. You just mute the mic because it seems that he was. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with him. Anyway, verse 10. هذا نتحكم معه لو بن يربي وحياة كي ذكرنا بالحمام ونصاف قمه على صنعينه ونلهم بانه وعلى منها عارت. And so this is the king of Egypt saying, come, let us act wisely with him, talking about the nation of the Israelites, unless he multiplies, and it might come to pass that if war happens to us, or if we encounter war, that he will also be added to those who hate us, to our enemies. And he will also enter into warfare against us and go up from the land. So this is interesting because Joseph was in charge of Egypt, and he was basically in charge of building the storage cities. So I can imagine that the Israelites, not only being simple shepherds, but eventually became very well known for their industry and their architectural abilities and being city builders. Verse 11, وَيَسِيبُ عَلَىٰ سَرَمِسِيم لِمَعًا أَنَثَى بِسِبْلُثَمْ وَيَابن عَرَي مِسْكَنُوث لِفَرْعَوْ et Pithom et Ramses. And so he said over him, talking about the Israelites. This is being spoken of in the singular, only because they're talking about the Israelites as a whole. And so he said over them, or over him, captains of Messene, which has to do with forced labor, in order to humble him with their labors. And they built the storage cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramses. And so they set them to work in order to bring them into a more humble position. Verse 12, وَكَأَشَرْ يَعْنُوا أَثَوْا كَيْنْ يَرْبَيْ وَخَيْنْ يَفْرَوْتْ وَيَقُوتْسُوا مِبْنَيْ بَنِي Yisrael. And as they subjected them to humility, or tried to humble them, so they increased, and they spread out. And so they says which means they had a dread from the presence of the children of Israel, which means the more crap that they did to them, the more they ended up being fruitful and multiplying. And so it had just the opposite effect. And so they really started to worry and had dread. Verse 13, وَيَعْذِيدُ مِصْرَيْمْ اثْ بَنِي Yisrael بِفَارِغ. And so the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with violent slavery. So they went from being maybe, hey, look, can you guys start building this, to now they're going into a really forced slavery mode. Verse 14, وَيَمَارِرُوا إِذْ خَيِّهِمْ بِعَبُدَا خَشَى بِخُمَيْرِ وبلبنين وبكل عبودة بالصدى إذ كل عبودتهم أشر عبدوا بهم بفعار. And so they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and with brick and all of the service of the field. And all of the service that they served, it was with this violent slavery. Verse 15, ويومر ملك מצרים למילדות העבריות אשר שם האחת שפרה ושם השנית פועה. And so the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, whose The name of one was Shifra, and the name of the other is Puah. Okay. Now, before we get into this part, you have to understand that they had a concern. One was numerical, and the other one was actually power and perhaps military might. And so now Pharaoh speaks to the Hebrew midwives. Verse 16, وَيُومِرْ بِيَلِّدْهِمْ إِذْ هَعِفْرِيُّوث أُرَئِيثٍ الْهَعُفْنَيْمْ إِمْ بَيْنْهُ وَحَمِيتٍ أُثُوْ وَإِمْ بَثْهِ وَحَيَاةٍ. And so he spoke, or he said, as you help the Hebrew women give birth, this was their jobs, they were midwives, and you look upon the two stones. If it's a boy, then you shall kill him, and if it's a girl or if it's a daughter, then she shall live. Now, there's been lots of questions about this term Ovnaim, which is a dual, which literally means the two stones. I read years ago that whenever we think about the time that the Israelites were actually in Egypt, they didn't use what's called the birthing stool. At that later time, they actually had a stool where the woman would sit upon and give birth. At this time, it was actually still stones. They would sit upon the two stones, and basically the same concept. Verse 17. What ترينا ميلدوث إذ إلهيم ولو عسوا كأشر دبر عليهن ملك مصرين وتحينا إذ هيلديم. And so the midwives feared God, and they didn't do as the king of Egypt spoke to them, and they allowed the boys to live. And that is the end of the first Aliyah. We're about to begin the second one. Now, I want you to keep in mind, too, the king of Egypt is, in effect, asking these Hebrew women to murder the paternal line of the Israelites. And that's going to be important when we get to the next couple verses. But because these two Hebrew women, who were also midwives, because they feared God, they didn't do what Pharaoh had wanted them to do, which was, in effect, murder the paternal line of the Israelites. Verse 18. وَيَقْرَأْ مَلَكْ مِصْرَيْمْ لَمْيَلَدُوث وَيُمِرْ لَهِنْ مَدُوعَ أَسِيثٍ هَدْبَرْ حَزَيْ وَتَحَيِّنَ أَتْحَيَّلَدِيمْ. And so the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and he says to them, "Why have you done this thing? You have allowed the boys to live." Verse 19. وَتُمَرْنَا هَمَيَلَدُوث إِلْ כי לא כנשים המצריות העבריות, כי חיות הן בטרם תבוא עליהן המילדת וילדו. And so the midwives spoke or said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. Because they are lively. Before the midwife comes to them, they have already given birth. So that's their excuse. Verse 20. وَيَيْتَبْ Elohim لَمْيَلَدُوث وَيَيْرَفْ هَعَمْ وَيَعْتْمُوا مَئُوث. So listen to this. This is really important. And so God made it well for the midwives. And the people increased and became strong, very strong. So it had the opposite effect. So as we've read before, the more that they put this hard labor on them and more that they tried to oppress them, the more they actually became more populous and actually gained strength. And so that's how God made it good for these midwives. Yes, somebody had a question.
I have one question. Yes, can I understand this verse in that way that God helps the midwives to their luck? So God helps them before the Pharaoh because they don't get punished or something like that.
Well, I guess you could, but the actual last part of the verse explains the good that was done for these midwives. Their aim was not so much as defying Pharaoh as it was in helping their people. These are Hebrew women who were just told to murder the paternal lines of their people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they risked their own lives by defying the Pharaoh. And so God made it good for them. And they saw that not only did they save the lives of these Hebrew boys, but it helped the people become more populous and gain even more power at this time.
Okay.
They became stronger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That was my question.
Verse 21. وَيْهِي خِيَّرَ مِيَلَدُوفْ إِذْهَا إِلَهِيمْ وَيَعَسْ لَهِمْ بَتِيمْ. Now this is a point I actually posted about the other day, and it says, and it was because the midwives feared God that he prepared houses for them. Now this phrase, وَيَعَسْ لَهِمْ بَتِيمْ, the lahim here for them is actually masculine, okay, which means, and just to make the point, whenever we talk about the midwives throughout this entire conversation, it's always in the feminine. There's no masculine part talking about these women here. And the only time you really get into the masculine is in verse 20, where it begins, Wayerev Ha'am. Ha'am, the people, is masculine here. And it says, Wayerev Ha'am, and the people multiplied. Wayatzmu, that's also in the masculine. And so the masculine here is talking about the boys, all right, or the Israelites as a whole, because the aim of Pharaoh was to murder and completely annihilate the paternal line of Israel. And because of the action of the midwives, that they actually feared God and evidently loved their people, that God prepared for the Israelite people as a whole houses, which is talking about the paternal houses. And later on in the Torah, we read about the registering of the Israelites was done according to their fathers' houses. That's how they were registered.
I have one more question, Yaakov. What would be the consequences for any people which don't or which act against the will of the Pharaoh? I mean, they will get sanctions or not usually.
Well, if we think about the birthday party of Pharaoh at the time of Joseph, we had the cupbearer and the baker. Mm-hmm. We're not told what they actually did, but they displeased Pharaoh, and one was put to death for it. So this is a direct command of Pharaoh to these women to murder these boys. And the concern of Pharaoh had several things. One, it was the population explosion of the Israelites, and two, the military strength that came with that explosion of the people, and the fear and threat that this rival former royal house might overthrow this new Pharaoh. So Pharaoh could have looked at these two women and considered that they were committing treason. So it was definitely very risky for them to disobey Pharaoh.
Well, they played with the Pharaoh. I mean, they didn't do what he wanted
They
them to
flat
do.
out disobeyed what he said. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they could have been put to death for that. Verse 22. وَيَتْسَوْ پَرْعَوْ لِكُلْ عَمُّ لِمُور كل حبين هي اللوذ هي أورا تشلخوه وكل حبات تحيون. And so Pharaoh commanded his people, instead of another group of Hebrew midwives. So evidently he put some of his people in this responsibility. So he says to his people, saying, every son that is born, you shall throw him into the river. However, the daughters you shall allow to live. So Pharaoh now has taken over the responsibility of the Hebrew midwives with his own people. Chapter 2, verse 1. وَيَلِخْ إِيشْ بَيْتْ لَوِي وَيَقَحْ إِتْ بَتْ لَوِي. And so a man of the house of Levi went and he took a daughter of Levi. Now, this is interesting because Levi had 3 sons. One of those was Kehath. Kehath is the father of Amram, who happened to be the father of Moses and Aaron. So Amram, which is what we will read later, not in this parasha, maybe the next parasha, we will read that Amram actually married his father's sister. So he literally took a daughter of Levi. Or this is Amram. His father would be Kehath, so he took his aunt through his father's side, which, by the way, later in the Torah is forbidden. We're not allowed to do that. Verse 2. What tahar ha'isha, what teled bain, what teire ofo ki tovhu, what tis penehu shalosha yorahim. And so the woman became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son, and she saw that he was very good, and so she hid him for 3 months. Okay? And why was she hiding him? Because of the orders of Pharaoh to his people, the Egyptians, that they kill all the Hebrew boys that are born. Not the ones that are already alive, but the ones who were born, the newborns. Verse 3. وَلَوْ يَخَلَا عُوذ حَتْسِفِينُ وَاتِّقَحْلُ تَيْبَاتْ غُومِ وَتَحْمِرَا بَحِمَار وَزَافِث وَتَسِيم بَا את הילד وتسيم בסוף על صفات היאור. And she was not any longer able to hide him, so she took a reed box. Gome is actually an Egyptian word, which is talking about the papyrus reed. And she covered it with pitch. This is probably like a tar, and also with asphalt. Zafit is actually the Hamar, I think, is the asphalt, and Zafit is actually the pitch. But either way, she's waterproofing this box so that it doesn't sink. And she set in it the boy, and she set and she said on or in the reeds on the bank of the river. Now you see lots of movies, lots of representations where they show this scene where the mother of Moses takes the little baby, puts him in a box, and sets him adrift on the water, and just kind of wishes for the best. And that's not actually what happened. He wasn't put in the water. He was put on the bank of the river. He wasn't set in the water. He was set amongst the reeds that were growing on the bank. Okay. Verse 4. وتيساv أخوته مرحوق لديعة ما يعسى له. And so his sister, this is where we learned that Moses had a sister. She kind of stood from afar just to see what would happen to him. And before we get to this part, I want to remind everyone that Joseph was second only to Pharaoh. His family are the Israelites, which made them pretty much royalty. They lived in the land of Goshen, which was the richest place you could live in Egypt at the time. They lived amongst not only the royal house of Joseph, but also amongst the priests, because Joseph married into the priesthood of Egypt. So they had lots of political power, political savvy, and also influence. Now, it was at the time of Moses' birth that the new Pharaoh came along. Okay, so this means their family, even if they were taken out of whatever positions of power they might have had, this was fresh. This was not a long time happening. This was at the moment that the new king, which is where we're reading right now. So the sister.
One question. There is one question in the comments from Nicola. He asks, or the question is, the word for the box is the same as for Noah's Ark, right? Exceptional symbolism and analogy. What's
yeah, it's the same name? Word. Teva.
Favor.
Teva.
Okay.
Means a box. Yep, and it's the same word that they use for the ark. The ark was, according to the Torah, a box. Now, the word that interesting when we talk about ark, we have the same word ark in English for the Ark of Noah as well as the Ark of the Covenant. Whereas in the Torah, the Ark of the Covenant is called the Aron. Aron is basically an ossuary. This is what they put Joseph in. It was like you can think of it as a coffin. But you're right. The word for the ark here that they put Moses in was the same word that they used for the ark in the days of Noah. But getting back to my commentary, so the sister of Moses, who was evidently older than Moses, she placed him somewhere on a river, and she waited to see what was going to happen. Now, the next part of this narrative is going to be really important because this is a family who was former royalty, had lots of influence and power, and that the Pharaoh was trying to exterminate. Right? Verse 5. وَتَيْرَدْ بَعْدْ پَارْعُو لِرْحُوتْ عَلْ وَنَعْرُثَيْهَا خُلِقُوتْ عَلْ يَدْ هَيْور وَتَيْرَ التباع بالثوق هتسوف وتشلح أمثاه وتقحيها. And so the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash at the river, and her her young women were going along the shore of the river, and she saw the box amongst the reeds, and so she sent her servant girl. This is a female servant, Emma, and she took it. Well, I mean, she took the box, so it's still not in the water. It's still on the edge of the river, still on the bank amongst the reeds.
One more question, Jacob. What do you mean with the bank? Isn't it the reed?
I don't understand your question. One more time.
The box was put on the bank, you said.
Yeah.
And because I'm reading the German translation either, and there it is described as Schilf. So I think the English proper translation is reed, reed, R-E-E-D.
Well,
so that's a part of the river.
Now, when you look at the word Sifat Hayar, it means like if you're going to walk along the Isar, okay? You would walk itlang ha'isar, the Isar, right? That part where you're walking along, that's the bank of the river, right? You're not actually in the water. You're not walking in the Isar, for instance. You're walking intlang, which means you're walking on one of the two sides, right? And that's what he's talking about here. The girls are walking along the edge, one of the sides of the river. And that's where she spots the box, which was sitting amongst the reeds. These are the plants, these reed plants that grow along the edge of the river.
Yes.
And that's where the box was sitting. It wasn't in the water.
Okay.
And that's what I was getting at. They always show scenes that the mother of Moses puts the box in water and kind of sends him off, and you see the little sister running along the edge. But that's not what it says in the Torah. She set him along in the reeds on the bank on the side of the river, not in the water.
Okay.
And she went away a little distance and watched just to see what would happen. Now we're at the part where the daughter of Pharaoh comes down to watch. Now, I want you to think about this. Miriam, who's Moses' sister here, and the mother of Moses as well. It was the mother who placed the box where she placed it. Miriam just stayed there. Now, what I want you to understand is this is the daughter of Pharaoh coming to the river to wash, to take a bath, to wash herself. Being the daughter of Pharaoh, I can almost promise you she's not just going to go out amongst the common people to wash in the river. All right, this is a secluded area of the river that's going to be left only for the royal house, right?
Right.
That's the daughter of Pharaoh. He's not going to let his daughter just go around and everybody in town watch her bathe. It's not going to happen. I don't care who you are as a monarch. You're not going to do that. And so the mother of Moses knew exactly where to place the box.
Yes.
Not only did she know where to place the box, it also implies that she had access to that place. Okay? And this is what I was getting at. The Israelites, they were basically royalty. And this new Pharaoh, this new king over Egypt, that was his main concern, was that he would lose his position of authority to these Israelites who he was trying to take out of power. He put them, instead of being city builders, now they put them under the administration of the forced labor, chiefs of the forced labor, and then put them to work. And he was trying to humble them. What does it mean by humbling? They went from a position of power to a position of servitude. And when that didn't work, now he's trying to murder the paternal line. So he's trying to decrease them, right? And so here we have the mother of Moses having access to the place where the daughter of Pharaoh is going to take a bath, and she placed the box. So it's really convenient. Yeah, go ahead.
But by the way, these midwives, did they live in the house of the pharaoh, or did they live in their own house? What was their how did they work?
They probably had their own homes. These were Hebrew midwives, and they were going to deliver Hebrew children. And so they more than likely had their own homes because they didn't live with the Hebrew women, because it says by the time they called for the midwives and the midwives got there, the children were already born. So
Mm.
they didn't live in the homes of the people that they were going to help bring children into the world.
No,
So I would.
I mean not in the homes of the Hebrews. The question was if they lived in the house of the pharaoh, like
I don't know.
servants,
Yeah,
and no, okay,
I have no idea. I don't know where anybody lived.
okay,
They don't say. If you didn't read it in the text, then how could I guess and say, well, they must have been Pharaoh's women? But that's not what it says. It says they were Hebrew midwives,
hmm
and we can assume that they didn't live with the people that they were helping to deliver children, because it says before you get there, the children are already born. So if they had
mm,
to go there, then they didn't live there. So
okay.
that's about as far as we can go with that. Um, so verse 6, what tiftach وترأيه את הילד وهنا نعر بوكيه وتحمل עליו ותאמר מילדי העברים זה. And so she opened it, and she beheld him, that it was a boy. Uh, and behold, the boy was crying. And so she had compassion for him. Now, this is the same word you see later when we talk about the punishments for idolatry. Whenever you have to stone someone or put someone to death, it says, "Don't let your eyes have compassion." And so it says, "Let tahmul anal alaf." Don't let your uh, don't let his eyes have compassion about it or about him. And so this is the same verse. So she had compassion on him, and she says, this is one of the Hebrew boys. Verse 7. Uh, so before I go there, I have to make a comment. She recognized that this was a Hebrew boy. Now, how she recognized it is not really explained, but the fact that he was put in a box and set on the side of a river probably let her know that this was a Hebrew boy that they were hiding. Now, interesting too is that we see uh, that Pharaoh gave orders to his people to throw the children into the river. So instead of throwing the boy into the river, she set him on the side of the river. So
hmm
just to make that point clear. Verse 7.
Yeah. By the way,
Uh,
this is also a clear sign that she knew what she was doing, right?
yeah, and this is another clear sign we're about to read now. Verse 7. وَالتَّوْمِرْ أَخُثُهُ إِلْ بَتْ پَرْعُهُ هَإِلَيْهِ وَقَرَاثِ لَخ إِيشَ مَيْنَخَتْ مِنْهَا إِذْرِيوث وَثَيْنِيقْ لَخ et hayelet. And so his sister says to the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, this is another thing. Here you have this young Hebrew girl hanging out with the daughter of Pharaoh. And that's, it really seems kind of strange. The mother knew exactly where to place him, where the daughter of Pharaoh was going to be coming to wash. And his sister still has access in the presence of the daughter of Pharaoh. So it lets you know that, or it seems to insinuate that they were familiars to the royal house of Pharaoh, that the daughter of Pharaoh actually knew who these people were, right? Uh, and so she says to the daughter of Pharaoh, shall I go and call for you a nursing woman, okay, of the Hebrews, so that she can nurse for you the boy, that she can nurse the boy for you, okay? And naturally, this is going to be the mother of Moses. Verse 8, what tomer la bat para'o lechi وتلخ ha'alma وتقرأ et aim hayalad. And so she said to her, so the daughter of Pharaoh said to her, go. And so the young girl went, the alma. She went and she called the mother of the boy, which is the mother of Moses. Verse 9. وَالتُّومَرْ لَا بَثْقَرْعُ حِلِيخِ et hayelet hazay وحنكيه لي وأني اتن et سخريخ وتقح هائشة هايلد وتنقيه. And so the daughter of Pharaoh says to her, talking about the mother of Moses, take the child, or go with the child, this child, and nurse him for me, and I will give you your reward. And so the woman took the boy, and she nursed him. So not only did the mother of Moses know precisely where to put the child, where the daughter of Pharaoh would find him, she understood that the daughter of Pharaoh was a compassionate person, which is how she saved the life of her son. And she was ultimately reunited with her son. Okay? And then she's going to be given a reward for nursing the boy for the daughter of Pharaoh.
Is the woman which was called by her the real mother of Moses?
Well, it says the mother of the boy. So I'm assuming when it says the mother of the boy, it meant his mother. Verse 10. وَيِقْدَرْ حَيَالِدْ وَاتَّذِئَيْهُ لِبَدْ پَارْعُ وَيِهِلَّهْ لَذَيْنْ وَتِقْرَ شِمُو مُوشَيْ وَتَوْمَرْ كِي مِنْ هَمَّايِمْ مَشِثِيهُ. And so the boy grew, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was a son for her. And she called his name Moshe, because she says, from the waters I have drawn him. Now, there's interesting play on this word Moshe. Moshe is a participle which means drawer, somebody that draws. And it's used later for how Moses drew the Israelites from Egypt. Now, the mother or the daughter of Pharaoh says she named him Moshe because she drew him from the water, which we know that she didn't draw him literally from the water. But in Egyptian, the verb meshesh means to be born, and this is where you get the word, for instance, Ramses. The name Ramses comes from Ra Meshesh, which means Ra has given birth. Okay, you have Tuthmoshe or Tuthmeshesh, which means Thoth, who is one of the deities of the Egyptians, also gave birth. And so the name Mesh, which is where we get, which is similar sounding, at least, to Moshe, in Egyptian means to be born. Now, the Egyptians were very superstitious. I don't want to say superstitious. They believed in more than a single deity, and they had the Nile, which was the source of their food, their wealth, and it was responsible for bringing new soil and sediment that they could grow their crops, and it was actually how the Egyptians were able to save not only themselves but a lot of the nations around them for having the surplus of grain that Joseph saved. And so what she's probably, the idea she's thinking here is not necessarily Hebrew related, but she says, I have given birth to him from the water. And so in her mind, she probably was thinking that he was a gift of the Nile deity, the Nile god, the Nile being a personified. And that's why she kept the child and she named him Moses. Just an interesting parallel. Verse 11. Also, that verse 21 was, or verse 10 was actually the end of the second Aliyah. We're now beginning the third Aliyah. Verse 11. ويهي بيميم هايم ويقدر موشي ويتسي إل إخاو ويار بسفلوثان ويار إيش مصري مكي إيش عبري ما إخاو. And so it happened that in those days, as Moses began to, or he grown up, that he came out to his brethren, and he looked upon their labors, and he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew, one of his brothers. Now we see in popular movies or representations today of this story, where Moses is seemingly oblivious to who he is and who his mother is and who his people are. And this is not true. And we see this here. That he grew up, he was weaned by his mother. Normally, I've heard different accounts about the weaning process, but normally a child takes at least 3 to 4 years before they're successfully weaned from the breast, and they know who their mother is. Evidently, Moses not only knew his mother, she probably stayed in the house of the daughter of Pharaoh, not necessarily literally in the house, but at least in close contact, because it says Moses came out to look at the labors of his brothers, which were the Hebrews, and he saw an Egyptian man, striking a Hebrew, one of his brother Hebrews. So he recognized who his people were. He wasn't ignorant that he was a Hebrew. Verse 12. Wayefen kol v'cho wayar ki ein ish wayak et hamitzri wayitmenehu b'chol. And so he looked here, and he saw that there was no man, and so he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So he knew what he was doing would have been a crime. Otherwise, he wouldn't have looked from right or left. He wouldn't have cared if anybody was there. And so we can look at the participle makeh in verse 11 as the Egyptian striking the Hebrew, okay, as he could have been trying to kill the Hebrew, not necessarily just smacking him around, because it's the same verb used for Moses. It says, Wayak et hamitzri, and he struck the Egyptian, which literally means he killed him, which is why he hit him in the sand. Verse 13. Just look. Just want to look at my comment section, make sure there's no questions. Verse 13. ויצא ביום השני, והנה שני אנשים עבריים ניצים, ויאמר לרשע, למה סקי רעיך? And so he came out on the second day, and he beheld two Hebrew men fighting. And so he says to the one who was wrong, to the Parashath, which means the one who is committing the wrong, why are you striking your neighbor, Ra'echa? Okay. Verse 14, وَيُومَرْ مِي سَمَخَ لَإِيش صَار وشفيت علينا هل هرغيني أنت أمير كأشر حرقت إت مصري ويرى موشي ويومار خين know that هالدبار. And so he says, who set you as a man who was literally the word Sar means a prince or an administrator and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me? And now this is an interesting phrase, and we have the participle omer, which literally means saying, but here it has the idea of meaning. In Hebrew, when you want to say what do you mean, you say "Ma'at omer." What are you saying, right? And so he's saying, he's asking, do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? And Moses was afraid, and he says, truly this thing is known, or the thing has been found out. So while Moses killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand, evidently the person that he saved began to spread the rumor, hey, this Moses guy, he's pretty cool. You know, he saved me yesterday from getting killed by these Egyptians. Right? So now he knows that the rumor has gotten out, or the thing has gotten out, and people know what's going on. And so he was afraid. Verse 15, וישמע פרעה את הדבר הזה, ויבקש להרוג את משה, ויברח משה מפני פרעה, וישב בארץ מדיין, וישב על הבאר. And it says, so Pharaoh heard this thing, talking about Moses killing the Egyptian, and he sought to kill Moses. And so Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh, and he dwelt in the land of Midian. And it says he was living, or he was dwelling, or even he was sitting next to a well, or next to the well, where it says Al-Habbe'er. Verse 16. ולכהן מדיין 7 בנות, ותבואנה ותדלנה ותמלנה את הרחתים להשקוף צאן אביהן. And so the Kohen, for the Kohen of Midian, was 7 daughters, and they came to draw, talking about drawing water, and to fill the water troughs, and to give the flocks of their father water to drink. Verse 17. ويضوء هرعيم ويغارشون ويقوم مشي ويوشيعان ويشك et sonam. And so the shepherds came and drove them away. So they drive away the daughters of the priests of Midian. Okay? And so Moses rose up and saved them. And he watered their flocks. Verse 18. واتفون رؤعيل أبيهم ويوم مدوع لحارة بو hayom. Now it says that they came to Reuel. Reuel is the name of the Kohen of Midian. He's later going to be called Yithro. So he has two names, Reuel and also Yithro. So this is the father of the 7 daughters, and he is also the Kohen of Midian. And so they come to Reuel, their father, and he says, "Why have you come so quickly today?" وَتُمَّرْنَا إِيش مِصْرِي هِتْسِلَانُ مِيَدْ هَرُعِيم وَغَمْدَلُ دَلَا لَانُ وَيَشْقَتْ هَتْسَونَ. And so they says, an Egyptian man saved us from the hands of the shepherds. Now, I want to make a point here that we don't know who these shepherds are, but whoever they were well known, because it says that these shepherds came. Not just some shepherds came, but the shepherds came. These were specific shepherds that were evidently known to the Midianites. Okay? And when the father asked, "Why'd you come so quickly today?" They said that there was an Egyptian man who saved us from the hand of the shepherds. Now, this indicates that this was an ongoing process, that they were often abused by these shepherds, and it eventually, or evidently, took a long time for them to water their flocks, which is why the father was so amazed and come back really quickly today. And so it was enough to say that the shepherds came, and this Egyptian saved us from the hands of these shepherds. And he also drew, and it's talking about drawing water for us, and he watered the flock. And so this was one of those instances I've spoken about many times where you have the infinitive, we have it here, dalo, and then you have the perfect, vala. Okay, and whenever you see this, use that way. You have the infinitive with either a perfect or imperfect. That's an emphatic form. So it's just saying he definitely, he also watered for us, which was indicating that it was something out of the ordinary, basically. And he watered the flock. Verse 20. ويومر بنوثاف وأيو لما زي عزبتن את האיש קראין לו ויאכל להם. And so he says to his daughters, and where is he? Why? What is this? Or why is this that you have forsaken the man, calling that he may eat bread? Verse 21. ויואל משה לשבת את האיש וייתן את ציפורה ביתו למשה. And it says that Moses had determined or decided, he decided to dwell with a man, speaking about Reuel, who was the Kohen of Midian, and he gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses, which means that Reuel, or Yithro, gave his daughter, Zipporah, to Moses as a wife. Verse 22. وَالتَّيْلَتْ بَيْن وَيَقْرَأْ את שמו גרשום כי אמר גר הייתי בארץ נוכריה. And so she gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, which literally means a stranger there, or not a stranger. Ger does not mean a stranger; it just means a resident. And he says a resident there, Gershom, because he says, I am a resident in a foreign land. Okay, so he's in Midian, and he considers that a foreign land. Okay, now this word ger, I've commented on many times. You see lots of translations where they play around with the translation, and they want to say that ger means a convert, and that's absolutely not correct. Ger only means a resident. It doesn't mean a stranger, because that would imply that you don't know who the person is, or he might be from a foreign nation. And the word ger is really context dependent, meaning that it can be talking about a foreigner. It could be talking about a fellow Israelite. Levites are also called Qara'im, because they dwell amongst these tribes. Verse 23. ויהי בימים הרבים ההם, וימות מלך מצרים, ויענהו בני ישראל מן העבודה, ויזעקו ותעל שרעתם אל האלוהים מן העבודה. And so after it was after those many days, that the kingdom of Egypt died, and the children of Israel groaned or sighed from the labor, and they cried out, and their cry came up to God from the service. 24. וישמע אלוהים את נאקותם, ויזכור אלוהים את בריתו, את אברהם, את יצחק, ואת יעקב. And so God heard their groaning. Actually, the similar other verb. And so Elohim heard their groan. And Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and also with Jacob. 25. Oh, it sounds like I'm underwater. How about that? Is that better? Do I still sound like I'm underwater? Much better. Okay. Yeah, I'm using the microphone from my computer, and so I actually put my hand over the top of the microphone, so I apologize about that. Verse 25. وَيَرْ Elohim et b'nei Yisrael وَيَيْزَعْ Elohim. And so Elohim saw the children of Israel, and Elohim knew. So excuse me a minute, my throat's getting a little dry. Much better. So that was the end of the third Aliyah. Chapter 3, verse 1 begins the fourth Aliyah. And this is going to be a very good, interesting chapter. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to come into the chat, into the studio, and we can discuss the question, or write them out here. If you write them in the Well, I didn't actually quit Coca-Cola, but I decided to drink water today because I know everyone's concerned about the amount of Coca-Cola, or actually Pepsi, that I've been drinking. My wife as well, and I appreciate the concern, so I decided to drink water today. But I will try to limit my soda consumption. Besides, I haven't got any checks from Pepsi or Coca-Cola for all the free advertising. Anyway, so chapter 3, verse 1. Moshe haya ro'eh et son Yithro choteno kohen Midian. وينحاج את הסון אחר המדבר ויבוא אל הר האלוהים הורבה. And Moses became a shepherd of the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. So here we have another name for the priest of Midian. This is the father-in-law of Moses, and he's also called Reuel. So we have Reuel and Yithro, two names so far of Moses' father-in-law. And he drove the flocks to the other side of the wilderness, and he comes to Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, wherever Midian was, it was the opposite direction from Egypt, because he fled from Egypt, went to Midian. Okay? We don't know where his father-in-law dwelt in Midian, but wherever it was, it says that Moses drove the flock to the other side of some wilderness. Okay? And it was at that other side of the wilderness that he actually came to the mountain of God that's called Horeb. Okay? Verse 2, Vayera Malach Adonai Elau Bilavat Eish Mitoch Hasinei Vayar Vahine Hasinei Bo'er Baish Hasinei Einin Uchal. And the angel of Adonai appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of this bush, Hasinei. And he saw and he beheld the Sinai was burning with fire. What? He's burning with the fire, Baish. But the bush was not being consumed. It was not consumed. Verse 3. Wayomer Moshe Asura na wa'ir'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh madua lo yiv'ar hasinei. And so Moses says, let me now leave and see this great sight. Why is the bush not burn? Okay, why does this bush not burn? Verse 4. Vayar Adonai ki sar lir'of vayikra elau Elohim mitoch hasinei vayomer Moshe vayomer hineni. And so Adonai saw that he left off the sea, and he called out, and Elohim called out to him from the midst of the bush, and he says, Moses, Moses. And he answered, here I am. Now, at this point, this is something I spoke of, I think, last Shabbat about the Melech Adonai. My own personal opinion, anytime it talks about God appearing to someone in the Tanakh, you have different methods, but it's never the reality that we understand God to be appearing to anybody. It's always in the form of the Malach Adonai, the angel of God, in a dream or in a vision, okay, or It could be in the physical form of this Malach Adonai. Whenever we read the Torah, we're told that it was God that appeared to Moses in this bush, but we see it was actually the Malach Adonai that appeared to him in the bush. We see that it was Adonai who was in this column of fire, which is actually where it says he dwelt in this Arafel, which is a description of this column of smoke and fire that led the Israelites out of Egypt. And it says that it was the Malach Adonai who was actually in this pillar or this column of fire and smoke. When Moses sent messengers to the different kings, he says, this is what you say to them. We were in Egypt. We were abused by the Egyptians, and I'm ad-libbing. And he sent his malach to us to lead us out. So this was the malach that was in the column of fire. It says anytime that Moses spoke with God, the column of fire came down and spoke with Moses. So who was in this column? It was the Malach Adonai. Now this column was called the Kavod Adonai as well. When we read chapter 16, which we'll be reading in a few weeks, the Israelites begin to complain about having nothing to eat, and so God sends them the manna for the first time, and also the quail. And he says that the Kavod Adonai appeared at the edge of the camp. Okay? And so all Israel saw the Kavod Adonai whenever they got to Sinai, the mountain of Sinai. It says that the Kavod Adonai came upon the mountain in this column of fire. That's what's at the top of the mountain of fire. And it says clearly that the Kavod Adonai appeared to the Israelites as a consuming fire. However, we read later when Moses was speaking with God on the mountain, he says, show me your Kavod. So whatever it was that Moses was asking to see, it was not what he had already seen. It makes no sense to say, show me your Kavod, when he'd already seen it, right? And this is where we get to this phrase where God says, no man can see me and live. What is he talking about? He's talking about the reality of who Adonai really is. This is what Moses was asking to see, and not this kavod that he'd already seen, brought him out of Egypt, appeared to him in the burning bush. Okay, and so, in my opinion, this Malach Adonai to me is the same one. Of course, Melech disagrees. He says it doesn't have to be, and it really doesn't have to be. It could be different angels of God. You know, he has many. But in my opinion, it's only one who is called the Malach Adonai, and it is this Malach Adonai that appears to the various prophets in the physical form. And also, on the same subject, when Miriam and Aaron began to question the prophethood of Moses, I think that's in Numbers chapter 11 or 12, God says, hey, y'all come to the tent of meeting. He appeared to them at the tent of meeting, and he basically told them, he says, there's going to be a prophet amongst the Israelites, then I will make myself known to them in either a vision or a dream. However, Moses is not so. I won't appear to him in some kind of vague form, but he will actually see the form of God. And we see earlier that when this column of fire appeared upon the mountain, it says that the Kavod Adonai appeared to the Israelites as a consuming fire, but they saw no form. In the same word, they saw no form. They only heard a voice. However, Moses actually saw the form. The Tamunat Adonai is what it says there. So, does God actually have a form? No, I don't believe so. I believe that this form that Moses saw was the Malach Adonai, which is the physical representation of Adonai on this earth, which is why the two are often interchanged. You can say Malach Adonai or Adonai himself, makes no difference. Okay, any questions? All right. So, where was I? Verse 5. وَيَوْمَ أَلْ تِقْرَبْ هَلَوْم شَلْنَ عَلَيْهَا مِعَارَ غَرَيْهَا فِيهَا مَقَوْمْ آشر أَتَّى أُمَيْذ عَلَىٰ أَدَمَتْ قُدَيشْهُ. And this is another very, very interesting phrase. It says, and so he says, this is the Melech Adonai, or Adonai himself, says, don't come near here. Don't approach to where I am. Take off your sandals from your feet, because the place upon which you are standing is sacred ground. Now, throughout the Tanakh, you can look from one place to the other. There's only one other place that this is said. And this is in the book of Joshua, when it says that the prince of the host of heaven, or the host or the armies of Adonai, came and spoke with Joshua. And what did he say to Joshua? Don't come near. Take the sandals off your feet, because the place where you're standing is sacred ground. So this is the same angel. This is the same person that appeared to Moses, appeared also to Joshua, which makes perfect sense, because God tells Joshua, as I was with Moses, so I shall be with you, which is what we're about to read here. This is the same phrase that God tells Moses here in just a few minutes. And of course, we read about this prophet in Deuteronomy chapter 18. He raised up amongst the Israelites, from amongst the brothers, who was like Moses. And the person that God told Moses to raise up was actually Joshua. He took the job of Moses. Okay, how is he a prophet like Moses? He actually spoke to the same Shabbat that Moses did. God told him, I will be with you, like I was with Moses. He was actually physically present with Moses when he walked the tablets of the law. As Moses spoke to God when this column of fire came down, we read about when Moses was out to speak to the people, that Joshua, he stayed in the tent in the presence of Adonai. So that we don't read about any other person who ever was in the tent as Moses was speaking to Adonai, or Joshua. And so it's my opinion. There's lots of other. Okay, it says I have a sound problem again. Hopefully you've heard what I said. But there's lots of other similarities between Moses and Joshua that leads me to believe that Joshua is the prophet of Deuteronomy 18 that God promised to raise up amongst the Israelites. So does it sound better, or is it still bad again? Before I continue reading. I'll wait just a second. I know I have a delay here. Okay, it's good now. Tov ata. All right. So, verse 6. Wayomer Anochi Elohe Avicha, Elohe Abraham, Elohe Yitzhak, Elohe Yaakov, Wayaster Moshe Panav, Ki Yareh, Mehabit Il Elohim. And he says, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Yaakov. And Moses hid his face because he feared to look upon God. So, Shabbat Shalom, Melech.
Shabbat Shalom. How are we doing today?
So far, so good.
All right.
We are live streaming right now to 3 places: Facebook, YouTube, and Hopin.
Hopin.
Yeah,
Oh,
I just heard about it today. I don't know what Hopin is,
I've heard of Facebook
but
and YouTube.
yeah, I've never heard of Hopin, but evidently it's just as big as the Streamyard, which I know almost everybody at YouTube uses. It's what, according to the site, the UN uses that platform.
Okay.
The cool thing about it is it's on a public registry, so I've got the World Alliance of Qara'im registered there. And so
Okay.
anytime I do a live stream now, it's going to be an event, and it's going to be put in the public registry at Hopin, so anybody could join in if they want to, hopefully.
Never heard of it in my life.
Me neither. I just heard about it today when I was setting all this up.
All right. I mean, it would be more useful if we could stream maybe to Twitter or something like that.
Twitter doesn't have the option. You can't do it.
Oh, really?
All right, so we're on Exodus chapter 3, and we're starting at verse 7.
Exodus chapter 3, 7. All right, hold on a second. Let me bring it up.
Yep.
Okay, 1 second here. You can go ahead and I'll find it. Exodus 3, 7.
Okay. ويؤمر أدوناي رأوا رئيسي إذ أعوني عمي أشر بمصرين وإذ استعقثان شمعتي مبني نوغشاو كي يدعتي إت ماك أوفاو. And Adonai says, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and their cries I have heard because of their nogashao, which literally means the taskmasters or the bailiffs, if you want to say the bailiffs of Pharaoh. These are the people who were put over these are the princes of the workforce, the Sare Messim that we read about in chapter 1. And they're the ones who actually appointed the Shotarim over the Israelites that we'll read about in just a few minutes. And so these are actually the guys who beat the officers of the Israelites. And so he says, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters, because I know their pain.
Right. So,
and I think in modern Hebrew you actually say Ko'ev Eli, or it hurts me or pains me.
Yeah, you could say that. So yeah, it's the same root here. Yep. You could say machov even in modern Hebrew, but it's usually ka'ev. And if you want to say I'm in pain or it hurts, you say ko'evli. It hurts to me. So, but it's interesting here. Ra'iti et ani ami v'tzakatam shamati ki yadati et machoav. So I've seen the suffering of my people. So there are 3 things here. Seen the suffering of my people. I've heard their cry. And I know their pain, right? So it's kind of like the emphasis here 3 times, very typical of the Tanakh, where you have like this parallelism, right? See the oppression, hear the cry, and know or feel the pain, right?
Yeah.
And what I want to say is that this is very related to the which we're going to see a lot, the verb pakad, pei kuf daled, which is usually it's very, very, very difficult to translate into English. Usually they translate it as visit, or they translate it as visit or remember or something like that. But I don't think that those translations do it any justice. It's more like the idea of God making a promise and then many years later, just when you think he forgot you, kind of coming back and fulfilling that promise.
Yeah.
It's always associated with that. Always associated with a kind of promise that's given at a certain time, and then much later that promise is fulfilled, right? So, for instance, I'm trying to think. There are examples like when people are barren, and God promises that they'll have a child, and then he remembers them, and they have a child, which is
actually, in the story of Sarah, it says that God will visit Sarah, and it uses the same verb at this time next year. We also see that both Yaakov and Yosef say the same thing, that God will certainly visit you. Don't leave me here. Take my bones with you, or whatever. So we have this interesting thing happen to me, directly related to this verse, because we have all three elements in this verse. I was in Jerusalem, seems like forever ago, and I was walking up to the Kotel, which is where all the Jews go to pray. Well, I don't know if all go to pray there. A lot of them go to pray there. And there's this wall on the road. As you go in, actually, when you're standing on the wall, at the part where I saw this, is where it kind of curves and goes down to where the wall is. But if you're standing at the top of the hill on this road, then you look at the Mount of Olives on the other side. Anyway, on that retaining wall, this stone wall, it was written. It says, Adonai roe, Adonai shomea, wa Adonai yodea. No, it says Adonai atta roe, atta shomea, wa atta yodea. It says, God, you see, you hear, and you know. And I actually got if you go to my Facebook profile and look at my photos, you'll actually see it. I took a picture of it. So verse 8. And this is going to be an interesting one too, because when Yaakov was on his way to Egypt, when Joseph sent for Yaakov, he stopped in Beersheba and he prayed. And it says that God appeared to him and told him, "Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. I'm going with you," is what he says. I'm going with you. And I'll certainly bring you up from there. And this goes also, we spoke last week about death and resurrection. I think it was last week. There's two things that I want to mention here in this regard, is that when we see the promise of the land being given, it says, "I will give it to you and your seed after you." Okay? But Abraham didn't receive it. Isaac didn't receive it. Neither did Jacob receive it in their days. So in order for them to receive the promise of having that land along with their descendants, it would have to happen after their death or after their resurrection in order to give it to them. Also, the angel promised to bring Yaakov back. He says, "I will bring you back up from Egypt," which didn't happen until after his death. But anyways, verse 8 says, "Wa'irei lihatzilo miyad Mitzrayim, u liha'alotho min ha'aretz hahi, il eretz tova ורהבה אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, אל מקום הכנעני וההיתי והאמורי והפריזי וההיבי והיבוסי." Verse 8 says, "And I'm going down to save him from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring him up from that land to a land, a good and spacious land to a land flowing with milk and with honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Sounds like a plague almost. But he says, I'm going down. Now, the point I'm making here is that when Yaakov is going down to Egypt, he says, I'm going with you. So to me, it just kind of seems like something's missing, that maybe when Joseph and Yaakov died, that God left, which is why it says that later the cry came up to him, wherever him to and him is, and then he remembered the covenant, and so now he's going back. And it reminds me of an instance in the prophet Ezekiel, where it talks about the Kavod Adonai leaving from the Temple Mount, and it has never returned, by the way. But as long as this Kavod was in the temple, the Israelites were never actually conquered by another nation. Now, they've had problems. They had wars with other nations, but they weren't exiled and the land destroyed, devastated, until that Kavod left, and then the enemies came in and destroyed the temple there. And but anyways, it just seems interesting. He says, I will go down to save him from the Egyptians.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What verse are we in now? I'm sorry about that. I just had to take care of something very quickly. What
Verse
verse are we
8.
in now?
9.
Verse 8.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
In 9?
No. I just read verse 8. That's what I was commenting
on. Okay. Yeah, so you were talking about this verb ered, right? I'll go down.
Yeah.
It's the same verb it's the same thing that's used in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where
Yep. He froze.
Is my headphone making like a funny sound?
No, I hear
I just
you
want to
fine.
make sure I'm making a funny sound.
No, everything's fine. Melech froze.
I'm frozen?
Now you're back. Now
I'm back. Okay, so I was going to say that
He came back.
I was going to say that the same verb is used when God goes down to see what's going on with Sodom and Gomorrah, and if I'm not mistaken, the same verb is used when he goes down to see what's going on during the flood of Noah, or he goes down to see what humanity is doing on the earth. I believe also it uses the same verb, lirot, to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it raises the question, what does this mean, right? I get asked this every single year when we encounter these verbs. What does it mean? God has to come down and see. He can't see from heaven. He doesn't know what's going on. What does this mean, right? And again, I think it's related very much to this idea of lifkod, right? There's a certain time and a certain place and a certain context in which Yehovah decides he's going to turn his attention towards something and start taking care of business, right? He'll kind of like, quote unquote, ignore things for a while, or he'll let things reach a point where it's the right time to kind of, handle business. And that's what this is referring to.
Yeah. It's also used in the story of Yaakov whenever he's in Beersheba and he's going down to Egypt to meet Joseph. He says, I'm going down with you.
Right.
And so that's interesting that now here we have again. So but
I think that
really
means something else there, because I think in that case it means something else, because there he's going down with you. It doesn't mean that he's going down to the earth to see. It means that he's going to go down to whenever the patriarchs are said to go to Egypt, it always uses the word the verb la redet, to go down, right? So, and to go up to the land of Canaan is to go up, la'alot. So I think he's just saying, I'll be with you, basically. So it's slightly different context there, in my opinion. But this idea of, so people say, oh, this Torah is just a fake, stupid document. Because what is this, what kind of, these are obviously, basically, practically, idol worshippers, or they just emerged from idol worship because they're saying God's going to come down and see. What does this mean that, God is going to come down and see, and he can't see from heaven. He has to look. He has to see. This is ridiculous, right? This is a stupid document, right? That's what I hear. That's the subtext of a lot of what I hear. But I always remind people the end of the book of Job, where basically God says, "I'm God. I do whatever the hell I want." You don't question me. No, really, that's basically what Job says. That's the book of Job says, right? Don't try to figure me out. Don't try to put your human understanding, overlay it on me, right? I do things my way, and you be quiet, because you've been around for 50 or 60 or 70 years, and I've been around for eternity. So shut your mouth and pay attention for once. Something I have to tell someone around here all the time. Anyway, so at any rate, there's this idea that God, that Yehovah, when the time is right, turns his attention to something, and he's like, okay, now it's time to take care of business.
Okay, verse 9. Any other comments before I get it? If not, I'll just keep reading. Verse 9. وعتا هن صعقت بني إسرائيل باع إلي بغم رئيسي حلاحت أشر مصرعيم لوحتسين أثام. And now, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come before me, or come to me. And also I have seen the oppression which the Egyptians oppressed them.
Yep. And again, this same language is used, I believe, both in certainly in Sodom and Gomorrah, that the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has come up to me, so I will go down and see what's going on, and I'll go down and look, right? And also, if I'm not mistaken, also in Noah, that the oppression of the people, I saw the cry of the peoples come up to me. Again, I'd have to go back and see the exact language, but again, it's the same kind of thing, and it represents the idea. So I mean, not to get metaphysical, but God created this illusion of time and space for us to kind of live our lives, so to speak, to grow and change and do things. And so he's working within this context of time that he created, to say at a certain time, now's the right time to act, right? It's the same idea, if that makes sense. When the cry gets strong enough, it reaches up to heaven, and now it's time to act. Now it's time to see and descend and act.
Yeah. Okay, verse 10. وعتا لخا وإشلحخا إل پرعو وهوتيت عمي بني إسرائيل من مصرعيم. And now go, I will send you to Pharaoh and bring out my people, the children of Israel, from Egypt.
Yep.
Verse 11. ويومر موشي إل هالوهيم مي أنغي كي إليخ إل پرعو وخي أوتسي إت بني إسرائيل من مصرعيم. And so Moses spoke to Elohim, or he says to Elohim, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring out the children of Israel from Egypt?
All right. And it later on says that Moses was the most humble person, or a very humble person. I think it says the most humble person. Anav Ma'od, I think it says, or very humble. And here we see it, right? He doesn't really want the job. He doesn't think he's capable of the job. But at a certain point, as we'll see, Yoah gets a little bit pissed off at him and says, no, that's enough. Humility is one thing, but now you've gone too far. Anyway, go on.
Yep. Verse 12. ويومر كي إهي إماك وزي لخا هأوث كي أنوخي شلحتيها והוציאך את העם ממצרים, תעבדון את האלוהים על ההר הזה. And so he says, because I will be with you, and this will be a sign for you that I have sent you, as you've brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship Elohim upon this mountain.
Right.
Now, this is one of the things that I was saying when it talks about Yehoshua ben Nun. He says, Ki ihye imah. And this is one of the things that Elohim says to Joshua. He says, as I was with Moses, my servant, so I will be also with you. And so that's one of the things that was said. And also the instance of the sacred ground. Whenever he tells Moses, "Yeah, don't come near here. Take the shoes off your feet, because the place where you're standing is sacred ground." That's right. The only other place it's said is to Joshua, which makes it interesting. And also, Joshua was with Moses. Now, he wasn't the only one that was with Moses. At the beginning, when Moses went up to speak to God the first time, it says Aaron was with him. In fact, God specifically said, bring Aaron up. Then the next time when he went up to receive the tablets, it indicates that Joshua was with him when he went up, and also when he came back down. Also, when the pillar of fire would appear before the tent of meeting, and Moses was in there speaking with God, it indicated, at least in one place, that Joshua seemed to be with him while he was speaking with God. It says that as Moses went out from the presence of God, speaking with God, that Joshua remained in the tent of meeting with God. So there's lots of things that, in my opinion, indicate that Joshua is this prophet that God wanted to raise up in Deuteronomy chapter 18. But anyways, that's one of the things. We lost Melech again. All right. Yep, he's back.
Sorry about that. Yep, I flipped out the Streamyard by mistake. Go ahead.
Yep. Where am I? Verse 13. ויאמר משה אל האלוהים, הנה אנוכי בא אל בני ישראל, ואמרתי להם, אלוהי אבותיכם שלחני אליכם, ואמרו לי, מה שמו? מה אומר אליהם? And so Moses says to Elohim, look, I'm going to the children of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers sent me to you, and they will say to me, what is his name? What will I say to them?
So before we get to that, which is obviously huge, right? The next coming verses are maybe in a certain sense like the central crux of modern Qara'ism in a certain sense, right? But
yeah, we could be on that for the next 2 years,
pretty much. But what I did want to say is that. So it says that the sign will be that you'll come serve me or worship me in this mountain. And as it was none other than Chacham Yaakov ben Yisrael pointed out to me that this is the mountain. The name of the mountain is Sinai, and this is the place where the fire was in the sneh, was in the bush. Yeah. So it's very possible that that the word Sinai is related to the word sneh, or bush, the burning bush. And if not directly related, then certainly a play on words.
Yep. Yeah, and also one thing that you have to understand here is one of the signs that I will bring you out, or that this is happening, is that you shall worship me or serve me on this mountain. Mm-hmm. Why is that so significant? It's significant because it's indicating in order for them to serve God on this mountain, they would have to leave with the sacrificial offerings as well. And that's one of the things that Moses explained to Pharaoh. We're not going to leave just to the men. We're going to leave with the men, the women, the children, and our livestock as well, everything that we have, because you're going to provide the sacrifices. And we don't know how to serve God until we get to the mountain. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really important and significant. The sign is not only that they're going to serve God on this mountain, but they're going to have everything that they're going to need when they come out.
Interesting. See, that's a good point. I always saw it a little bit differently, which is that basically Moshe is kind of toying with Pharaoh, because the whole thing is kind of like a kind of a psychological battle between the two of them. It's really beautiful. It's like justice, in the end, that Pharaoh who says, I don't know who this Yehovah is, and I won't listen to him. In the end, he's basically begging Moshe to have to ask Yehovah to bless him. Right now he knows who he is. Right now you know who I am. Right. So this is kind of like a psychological ploy that Moshe is kind of like toying with Pharaoh, saying giving excuses or reasons why he has to bring all the livestock out as well. At any rate, so go on.
Yep. Verse 14. Vayomer Elohim el Moshe, Ihye, Asher Ihye. Vayomer Kof Omar Livnei Yisrael, Ihye, Shelahani Elechem. And so Elohim says to Moses, Ihye, Asher Ihye, which can mean several or many possibilities. It can mean I am or I will be, what I am or I will be.
But as we know, that the simple future in Hebrew does not always mean will be, right?
It could be
always
I am.
Pointed out, right? As you always pointed out, it could be a lot of things, And I think in this case, it's basically a statement. It's the Job statement again, right? I am who I am, right? It's basically what it is, right? I am who I am.
Yeah.
It's the Ecclesiastes statement where basically, Shlomo Melech comes to the conclusion at the end of Ecclesiastes, all of these crazy things are happening in the world, injustice and all kinds of things that your head can spin from what you see. But at the end of the day, just put your head down, keep the mitzvot, be loyal to Yehovah, and that's the best, that's all that you can do, because the as it says in the end of Deuteronomy, the hidden things are God's, but the revealed things are for
us,
and
our children,
right? And our children, right? So there's a certain idea here of that Job statement or that Ecclesiastes statement, which is I am who I am. I do what I want to do. I know, I do things. I am not to be questioned. Not in a very humble way, I don't try to figure me out. It's exactly the same statement at the end of the book of Job.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Hebrew verbs, in English we have a tense, which has to do with time, and
Yaakov, I don't know if it's only me or other people, but your sound is very messed up. It sounds like you're talking from the bottom of a well.
All right, how about now?
Yeah, better. I'm glad to see that.
I'm using the mic on my computer instead of my Bluetooth, and I keep putting my Tanakh right in front of it.
Well, I thought it was that the Ishmaelites fished you out of the well.
Yeah. That might not be long. But the interesting thing about Hebrew verbs, in English and in most Indo-European languages, we have this idea of tense, which has to do with time, which is either a past tense, which is a past time, or it's a future tense, in a future time, or it could be even a present tense. And while we have a similar feature in Hebrew, it's not quite identical. We have an aspect of it. For instance, it can be future, but it doesn't actually have to be future. It can be past, but it doesn't require it to be past. So you have what's called a perfect verb, which means the action is completed. Now, it doesn't make any difference whether it's completed in the future, in the past, or right now. and that's where it's context dependent. Okay, it doesn't necessarily explain what we call tenses in English, as in the past, present, or future tense. It just has a either a imperfect, that the action is not yet complete, or a perfect, it's a completed action. And the time is dependent on the context, whether it's future, present, or past.
Well, I kind of, it's funny because Volky mentioned that when you were studying with him the other day, you mentioned this to him, and I don't know where you're getting this from. I kind of want to disagree, because I don't think you will ever find a verb that's in the tense that's in right now, like ehiyeh, asher ehiyeh, which will mean the past. It might mean the present, in the sense that I will be who I will be means I already am, So in that sense, like you said, it's the imperfect, which would include the present. But I can't think of an example except when it includes the vavi fuch, the conversive vav at the beginning, where it would actually represent the past. So I'm a bit confused as to why you said that. Not that you're wrong. I didn't understand what your point is. If you could clarify it a bit more, and maybe give an example.
For instance, we, like you said, with the while consecutive is a feature in Hebrew where it changes the imperfect into a perfect as far as semantically. The meaning itself changes from the idea of an imperfect into a perfect. For instance, when we read in Bereshit, Yomer Elohim Yehi Or, Yehi Or, we have the while with the imperfect form Yomer, which is actually Yomar. But when you add the vowel, then it changes the vowel vocalization as well as the accent, and it becomes Yomer. So this is actually an imperfect verb form, but it has a perfect meaning, and it's because of that vowel that we get that perfect meaning. So this is what Melech's talking about with the vowel mehupak. Mehupak means changing, which causes a change. All right. However, the imperfect and perfect, for instance, when you're reading a narrative and it's speaking about something that happened in the past, and it happens to use an imperfect form, even without the vowel consecutive, then we understand it to be a past tense, regardless of the imperfect, because the time itself is in a past narrative. Whereas if you're speaking of a future context, whether you can actually have a perfect verb form used in a future context, especially you see this lots in prophecies, and even though it's a completed action, it's actually still a future tense because you're talking about a future time. And we have this sort of in English, but we have to use a lot of different helping words with it. For instance, will have been. It will have been done. By the time you get to school, it will have been done, or whatever. That's actually a future tense. It hasn't happened yet. But by the time you get there, the action will have already been completed. And so that's a complete verb, which will be in the past tense by the time you get there, but it's still yet future. And that's what I'm saying. You can use these verbs in Hebrew the same way, although we tend to use past tense, present tense, and future tense verbs, and that's fine because that's basically the only way most English people are going to understand it is through tenses. Whereas in Hebrew, you have more of an aspect. It doesn't necessarily have to be what we consider past, present, or future time immediately related to the verb, even though it's taught that way. It's just not the case. And as we read it, when I see them, I'll point them out to you.
All right.
What verse we on again?
Verse 16.
16.
And actually we're on 15.
All right.
We're on 15, and
I'll
this is
take
the last verse of the fourth Aliyah. Did somebody say they wanted to read it?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
We Bartha Elah, we Sala, et Hadbari, Befi, we Anoki, Ye in Pika, we in.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're on chapter 3, verse 15.
Oh man, dang, I'm on the wrong. Which chapter was that again?
Chapter 3, that's verse 15.
You kind of like you on water again.
Yeah, let me move my book. Better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so we're in chapter 3 of Exodus, verse 15.
Okay, all right. My bad. I had to switch my phone up. Verse 15.
Yep.
All right. Wayomer od Elohim el Moshe ko Tomar el Bnei Yisrael Adonai Elohe Abotekim Elohe Abraham Elohe Yitzchak Elohe Yaakov Shelachani Elekim Ze Shemi Leolam Weze Zikri Ledor Dor.
Wonderful. You gonna translate it?
I know I could do I just know a little bit. I guess I've been trying out. I know Wayomer is to say the root of that is hard to say. We have a prefix yod meaning he. He should say old. How would you translate that? Like
That'd be like again or further.
okay. He said again. Elohim said again to Moshe. This you should say to the sons of Yisrael, Adonai, your God, the God of your fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Shalachani, to send. I will send to you, Alekim, this, and me, my name, Leolam.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. You're doing good.
I thought Melech just said something.
Are you talking to me, Yaakov?
No, he's reading the verse.
I can't
Somebody's
hear
whistling.
I was whistling because I didn't hear you.
All right.
Now I'm done with.
My Zay Shemi, this my name, Leolam. I know that's forever. So
Yep.
since you my name forever and Zay Zikri to remember for generations and generations or like forever
Yep.
and ever, so to speak.
Generation to generation. That's right. Door la door. And this is my zichri, which means my remembrance or my mention. This is how you're gonna remember and mention God.
Oh, please don't say that word, Yaakov.
What word?
Zichri. Forget it. Inside joke.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
It's an inside joke.
And so you did really well. And so God said further to Moses, so shall you speak to the children of Israel. Adonai, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance or my mention, how you're going to remember and mention me from generation to generation. I would love to spend the next several hours speaking about this form Yod Hey Wow Hey, but I would like to get through the Parashath.
Right.
But the only thing I want to mention is that when we're asked for the name, he tells them Ihye, which is in first person, imperfect form, from Hayah. Okay? And then when he tells them to go speak to Israel, he uses Yod Hey Waw Hey, which is in third person, imperfect form from Hawa. Now, Hawa and Haya semantically mean the same thing. But it's just interesting that it goes from a first person to a third person thing.
You're saying where does it go to a third person with the name Yehovah?
Yeah.
Well, I totally disagree, but I won't get into it right now.
Okay, why do you disagree?
I don't think that the word Yehovah has any grammatical meaning whatsoever. It's a name that's
You think it's
based
just a
off
bunch of vowels, right?
Yeah, just as you would have, let's say, what would be an example?
Yiftach.
Yehuda.
Yehuda actually has a very good meaning, which means he will be praised. That's actually an Aramaic verb form from the Hopin, and which is why you have the hey wow in the conjugation. That's where you get the Yeho from. The Yod is the third person imperfect prefix. The hey and the wow is actually the Aramaic stem letters from, or the stem prefix from the Hopin stem in Aramaic.
It may be
and
Aramaic, but those are Hebrew names, not Aramaic names. So you can't. I don't think you can bring Hebrew. I don't think you can bring Aramaic.
That's 100% Aramaic form. That's an Aramaic name. Yada is also in the Aramaic, and that is 100% an Aramaic verb form. Yehuda.
It may be an Aramaic verb form, but I don't think the name is based on Aramaic verb form. It's a Hebrew word.
All right. Well, explain to me where the hey and the wow come from the Hebrew.
Where the hey and the wow come from the Hebrew? They come from a play on words.
What's the play on words where the hey and the wow comes from?
A play on words means it doesn't have to have necessarily some kind of grammatical meaning. It would be like saying, I found this cat in New York, so I'm going to name it Yorkie. Does Yorkie mean anything? No, it doesn't mean anything.
So the actual meaning that Leah says, now I will praise God,
right?
Has nothing to do with the naming of Yehuda.
Of course it does, but it's Yehuda.
Well, how do you say
it's not a valid verb form?
Yes, it is. It's 100% valid.
She says
in fact, we have. Wait a minute. I'm gonna show. I'm gonna explain something to you. That's absolutely a valid verb form, and we actually see remnants of this verb form in verbs like Yehoshea, which is absolutely a verb form and is not even a name. It talks about someone being saved. Okay, so that is 100% a verb form, and you even see remnants of that in verbs like Yehoshea, which is not a name, that's a verb.
Remnants of what?
Yehoshea of the Aramaic based forms.
That's not Yehoshea. That's a Hebrew form. Lahoshia is a Hebrew verb, and Yoshia would be the he.
Where does the hay? Why you have the hay comes from? That's from the Hifil form.
No, it's from Yehovah.
I'm gonna say you're flat out wrong.
Okay,
you're flat out wrong. You're absolutely incorrect on that. You can say anything you want, but I'll prove you absolutely 100% wrong. How about let's see what your good buddy Robert Alter says about the word Yehoshea.
Go ahead.
No, I don't have it. I don't have it for me. Let me find the verse.
I could give you a lot of examples when.
I want to hear how he says that this is where Yehovah comes on this verb here. Okay.
It says first of all, what chapter and verse is that? I can look it up. I mean, you can look at all the namings. What is
this is not a name. It's not a name. It's a verb.
Yishma'ani El, so Shimon. Shimon doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Okay. This is a verb form, and it's not a name. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but there are a lot of names which are not verb forms.
Yeah, but this is an absolute verb. This is not what I'm talking about. Yehoshea. This is actually. I'm fixing to show you something, Melech.
There is no verb form Yehoshea in Hebrew.
Oh yeah, there it is. I'm fixing to show it to you.
Show it to me.
Okay.
Give me chapter
So
verse.
we have 1 Samuel 17:47 is one.
All right, let's see it.
Look it up.
I'm going to. Give me a second.
So that's a verb form. That's number one.
1 second. 1 Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
What's chapter and verse?
17:47. And this is actually the Hiphil verb form.
All right. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But even if so, there are many that doesn't prove that every name has.
No, it doesn't have to prove that. But I'm just trying to say that you can't say that you go from Iye. Okay, that's absolutely a foolish name. Doesn't mean anything. But we know it's an imperfect verb form. Okay, God Himself says His name is an imperfect verb form. And now you're telling me that the Yod He Vav He doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't have to be an imperfect verb form, even though the verse before that he tells you it's an imperfect verb form.
1 second. ידעו כל הקהל הזה כי לא בחרב בחנית יהושיע יהוה כי יהוה המלחמה ונתן אתכם בידינו.
Now this is I put this here because this is written in what's called the plenty or the full form. It actually has the yod. Sometimes you'll see it written without the yod in the before the ayin, and it's written with a seri on the sheen, which is how you would write it if it was written defectively. But the point is, this is an actual Hiphil form, and the hey and the wow has absolutely nothing at all to do with the name Yod He Vav He here. This is not Yehovah. We'll say this is not a name. This is an actual verb form from Yashar, and this is just a remnant of when Hebrew had verb forms that were very similar to the Aramaic verb forms that still.
Fine. I'll give it to you there. It's clearly a verb form, but I could give you
many
other examples.
Now this is no. Wait, this is where the name Yehuda. Now this is the Yeho. This is similar to the Aramaic. Verb stem, okay, the Hiphil, but the Yehu is also absolutely an Aramaic verb form. We don't have any example of the Hophin with the hey wow like you see here with the Hiphil. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But that to say that
it's not neither here nor there because there are many other examples where names don't have any grammatical meaning.
I'm sure there are, but when you have many names that are based upon third person imperfect verb forms, and you have names such as Yiftach, okay, and that comes from the verb patach, which means or liftach, to open, and the Yiftach. The only difference that changes that from a verb to a noun is in the final syllable. The pathach, which would normally be there, is always changed to a comments, and that you'll see in almost every name that's based upon a third person imperfect form. The only difference you see between the actual verb form and the name, it being a name, is in the final syllable where it's changed to a comments. Which is where you get Yeroham. Okay, Yeroham has a comments name ending where it should have a pathach, and when it's the verb form, it'll be written with a pathach. But since it's a name, then it has to be changed to a noun, which is accomplished by adding the comments in the final syllable.
Again, I don't think there's any proof that names in the Torah have to have any kind of grammatical meaning. And there are many examples. And I don't think the word Yehovah has any kind of grammatical meaning.
All right, we have a God with a meaningless name.
That's absolutely right. It's a name that's ineffable, as can be found in many other names. Okay. It doesn't have to have a name.
You heard it first from Melech ben Yaakov. We serve a meaningless named God.
I didn't say it's meaningless. I said it's not in
It has no meaning.
Like this, that if it had a meaning, if it had an actual grammatical meaning, then it would be again doing exactly what we were talking about before. It would be encapsulating God into some kind of word that we can understand. It would be the Job paradox again, where not paradox, or the Job statement again.
We do that throughout to make that claim is nonsense, because we do that throughout the Tanakh when we say that God is merciful. Okay, that's encapsulating God in the idea of mercy.
But that's not
God is called Elohim, which is also encapsulating him.
God is not called Elohim. God's title is Elohim. That's not his name.
Okay.
No, there's a big difference. And okay, let's say that what you're talking about here is some archaic verb form, and so you're saying that Yehuda fits into this, and Yehoah maybe also fits into this. I just because it may imitate some archaic verb form, I don't think that there's any implication there that it has some kind of grammatical meaning. As many names in the Torah do not have any grammatical meaning whatsoever. If we don't want to take Yehuda, we can take other examples as well.
Yeah, come on. Let's take another example of a meaningless thing. Yeah. Shimon, the final Holim Nun is used in many words like Shabbaton, and all that does is it takes a abstract noun. For instance, Shabbat is an abstraction, and it makes a noun. So you have Shabbaton.
Yeah, but Shabbat is a noun.
You have Shimon from Shema, and it actually is in the text where it tells you God has heard me, which is why he's called Shimon, which means heard, to be heard. Okay, so that's not a good case either, huh?
I think that is a good case. I think that I'm very well aware of the ending Vav Nun, but I don't think that's what's going on there. And Shimon, we could find other names as well. Let's think of another one. I don't know. I'm going to think of some of the sons. Yosef. Yosef is not.
Yosef. Interesting. Yosef.
No, it would be Yosef.
Interesting.
It would not be Yosef.
No, the final vowel, as I've said, is always lengthened. All right, but Yosef is actually would be a participle from Yasaf. Yosef is the participle form. It's not Yosef. But anyway, the interesting part about Yosef is that you see verb forms that actually have the same thing. So you have Yehosef, which is actually the name of Joseph at least once in the Psalms. I can't remember right off the top of the head where that is, but they actually use the same form, Yehosef. But anyhow,
no, it's not just anyhow. I think this is an important point, and I think what you're doing is
you haven't given me a name that doesn't have a grammatical meaning yet.
Well, I mean, you're always okay. Fine, 1 second here. I will.
This is gonna go on for the next 2 hours. Watch.
This can go on for a lot longer than that.
You said it too. I knew it was gonna happen.
Yeah.
No, it's a very important point, and I think it's absolutely incorrect.
Well, you can find that. Let me know. The point is that we could talk on the same subject for a long time. Never.
Oh, your book.
Back to immersion. Huh?
Oh, your book. You underwater again?
Yeah.
Oh, better.
Yeah.
My mic must be on the right side. All right. So anyway, I'm going to read until he finds something.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and go look through every single name right now, but what I would like to say
just when you find one, send it to me. We'll talk about it, outside of this.
Okay. Let's do it right now. Hold on 1 second. No, this is important because I think this is an absolute bullshit point. Because it's saying that every name has to have some kind of grammatical meaning, and I don't think it does.
I didn't say that.
You are saying that, essentially.
No, I said this has a grammatical meaning.
No, I don't think it does.
No, I'm actually on here. It's recorded, and I'll actually tag you where I said that I agree with you. Not every name has to have a grammatical meaning.
Okay,
Asenath.
Just because
Asenath is a name. It's not even a Hebrew name.
Some
and
verb
it was just
form,
the name of
just because a name may imitate some archaic verb form that you happen to find somewhere does not mean that name is saying that is equivalent to that archaic verb form. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna let Hashem himself tell you his name is a first person imperfect verb form. That's his name.
That's not
he
his
said
name.
It was an imperfect verb
name.
form.
He says his name is Ehiyah, but that's only in preparation to the revelation of the true name. We don't go around calling
He
God
said
Ehiyah.
to tell Moses to tell the people Ehiyah Shilahani Aleichem.
No, we don't go around calling. We don't go around calling God Ehiyah because that's not his name, right?
Well,
that's the explanation of the revelation of his name. Okay, and when it says
that's what he told Moses.
Wait a second. When it says you should call me Ehiyah, he's never called Ehiyah anywhere else in the entire Tanakh, and that's the proof. Okay,
I agree with you there.
Yehovah.
That's right.
He's always called Yehovah.
But
so don't wait. Wait a second. This is an important point. So don't tell me that his name is Ehiyah. His name is not Ehiyah. Okay, that's the explanation of how we're going to get to his real name, which is Yehovah. Okay, and as you said yourself, many names do not have to have an absolute grammatical meaning. Okay. Now the verb forms. There's so many. Wait a second. There's so many different verb forms in Hebrew that yes, you can always find some overlap with most names with some kind of weird verb form that is, as you mentioned yourself, archaic. But I don't think it's any proof whatsoever that many names have any kind of meaning as an actual word.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you exactly the way the text says. God himself explained his name as an imperfect verb form. If you can find any other explanation of the name of God other than that imperfect verb form, then I'll agree with you that it's not a verb.
No, he doesn't.
What do you mean?
Again, I give a simple English example of something like again, I found the dog in I don't know, in the dirt, so I'm gonna call him Dirty Wordy. Does Dirty Wordy mean anything? No. It's a play on words.
It's a play on dirty in word. But the point is,
right? But
God
wordy is not a word, right?
Dirty, wordy, yeah, probably not. But
for sure not.
Dirty is a word. It just is
part of his name may have some. It's obviously based on real words, but the name itself is not an actual word, and I think that is I think it's a big mistake. I personally think it's a big mistake to assume that every name, or you even say yourself, that not every name has a grammatical form. That even the names that seemingly have grammatical forms are necessarily using those grammatical forms. Even if you gave the example of Yiftach, okay, which is clearly a simple future grammatical form. Okay, he will open. All right, I don't even think that his name means he will open. Yiftach. Okay, I think that
it's just a name.
It's just a name. That's right. Names are just names. Mm-hmm. Just like you could see in English. Okay, nobody calls their kid, unless you're an American Indian, the jumps over big river or something like that. Nobody calls their kid a name that actually has a grammatical meaning for the most part. There may be some here and there, but for the most part, no one's calling their children names that have actual grammatical meanings. They're based on underlying words, and then the name is some kind of play on words or some kind of cute, or whatever version of that underlying word.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's not. It's a very important point. It's an extremely important point. We can leave it for now.
I heard what you said.
All right. And
I completely disagree. We see the explanation in the text.
No, we don't.
When he says, "What is your name?"
No, we don't.
He says, "Ehiyah."
That's right. That's the explanation of what his name is.
Okay, he explained it as what? It's a imperfect verb is the explanation of the name. And it's also a part of the name itself. And so I personally will actually go with the text here, which is the same way I will go with the text and the naming of Yehuda, of Shimon, Yosef, where they actually tell you that those names are based upon those words.
Yeah, based upon
those verbs and concepts. Those verbs and those are 100% grammatical forms. I don't know what you're talking about.
A Shimon really doesn't have any meaning.
Is absolutely a grammatical form.
Then find it somewhere as a regular word. The hearing of Shimon doesn't make sense.
Yeah, Shimon is a form of an adjective that's used to describe a abstract concept. It's the same thing like when you have Shabbaton.
Yeah, I got you on that one, except I understand that, but I don't. You may have found in the
Shimon is an abstract form of an adjective describing hearing, which is what she had said. God had heard me. Okay,
you and I both agree, obviously, that it comes from the verb shema, but I don't think that the word Shimon is meant to be an abstract form of shema. In other words, taking the underlying root shin mem ayin and then adding a vav nun and then saying that the shema means the hearing and then the abstract hearing. I don't see any proof of that whatsoever. These are just names that are based on underlying verbs, on underlying roots.
Whatever. I disagree with you. You're free to have your own opinion all you want.
That's right, I am.
So now let's get back to the text. We are on, I think, verse 16. And this is the beginning of the Fifth Aliyah. So, Lech wasafta et ziknei Yisrael marta elehem Adonai, meaningless name. Elohei Avotechem.
Not meaningless, but
it has absolute no meaning. It has no meaning.
I never said that.
Get any grammatical meaning from this name. This is what you said. I've got you on record.
It's meaningless. There's a difference.
I can play it back to you.
Yes, but it has to be understood.
I'm just ribbing you, man. I'm just ribbing you.
Okay.
I'm just ribbing you. Adonai, Elohei Avotechem nir'a elai, Elohei Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Lemor. Pachod pachadti etchem, et ha'esui lechem b'Mitzrayim. Go and collect or gather the elders of Israel, and you shall say to them, Adonai, the God of your fathers, appeared to me, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
What chapter verse are we on? Because I went to so many
we're in Exodus 3.
What's that?
Exodus chapter 3, verse 16. I have certainly visited you, or I'm definitely going to do. This is the emphatic form again. You and that which is done to you in Egypt. So this is the play on words here that Munich was talking about earlier. Akkad, this it's usually translated as visit, but it's also used when it talks about the punishment. God visits the wickedness of the fathers on the sons. And so we have here, and you have two different meanings of it. Which is the Israelites, meaning he's going to come visit them and rescue them.
Well, it means for good or for bad. It's the same meaning. It's just remember kind of at a later time, right? Pay you back for good or for bad, kind of, or remember, yeah.
So we got two parts to it. We got first there is talking about the Israelites, which is what Yaakov and also Joseph told them that God visit you. The idea of visitation at that point is to deliver them. The second part of that is ha'asui, and that which is done to you. So that is the punishment. It used both ways in that one.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Verse 17. Wa Umar a'alei etachem me'oni Mitzrayim il eretz ha'kina'ani wa'ha'hiti wa'ha'amori wa'ha'perizi wa'ha'hiwi wa'ha'yebussi il eretz zavat halav u'davash. And I'm saying, I am saying. And this is where we're talking about earlier. It doesn't necessarily have to mean a future or past. Here is actually Omar. Actually, that is the participle, I think. Yeah, so that's actually present. I am saying, I will bring you up from the oppression of the Egyptians to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And I want to point out something here is that you always have lots of hyperbole in the narratives here. Now, when you get to the land of Israel, it's said to be flowing with milk and honey, but it was actually in a drought. There wasn't a whole lot there when they left. And for many years after that, you have the wilderness, you have lots of desert regions. Now, whether that's changed over time, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it looked like when they went in.
Yaakov, you're down the well again.
I keep putting the book in front of me. But I don't know what it looked like when they actually went there. But evidently the drought was over, and they were able to take over the stores of the produce of the land that the Canaanites had grown. But it's always interesting that it talks about how fertile and wonderful this land is. It's flowing with milk and with honey. And I think that's
not only was it not a drought or a famine at that time. When the spies went up, they saw the grapes that were so large they had to be carried on the shoulders of the inhabitants there, right?
Mm-hmm. Verse 18. وَشَمَعُوا لِقُلَيْخَ وَبَثَا أَتَى وَزِبْنَي يِسْرَائِيل الْمَلَكْ مِصْرَيْم وَأَمَارَتِمْ إِلَىٰ أَدُونَاي إِلَهِ העבריים نقرأ עלינו ועתה נלך נא דרך שלושת ימים במדבר ונזבחה לאדוני אלוהינו. And they will listen to your voice, and you will enter, you along with the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you. Now this is the pearl when he says you shall say. This is supposedly the Moses, Aaron, and the elders of Israel now, and saying to him, to the king of Egypt, Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now let us go 3 days in the wilderness, and let us sacrifice to Adonai our God.
I'll tell you 19.
All right.
وأني يدعتي كي لو يدين حكم ملك مزرعين لا هلوك ولو بيار خزقوا.
Wonderful.
And I know that lo yedin
it literally means he will not give, but here it means he won't let you. He won't give you permission to leave, is what he's talking about.
He won't get, okay. Who won't give you permission? Melech Mizraim, the king of Egypt. La Haluk.
Yep. This is an infinitive form. Normally you see this infinitive form as lalechet, but here it's lahalok, which is interesting.
So is there like would that come out meaning something different or something? Is it?
No, it doesn't mean anything different. It's the same thing. It's just the way it's written. Normally, you have the verb is halak,
right.
But normally the hey is dropped in the conjugations. For instance, the imperfect third is yelech. The first person is elech, and that's why you have the seri on the imperfect prefix, because of the loss of the hey. But here in the normal I wouldn't say it's the normal, but it's the most used infinitive form for halak is lalechet. And here we have it as lahalok.
Okay.
But it means the same thing, to go.
To
So
go, okay.
they work together. It says lo yitain etechem lahalok is the meaning here. He won't give you to go, which means he won't allow you to leave.
Okay. All right. And wait, low, no, the yard, the hand, chazakwa, strong hand, mighty hand.
Yeah, and not even with a strong hand.
Or we could say we know that that I in this case we know that it does take a strong hand. Biad chazakah ubizroa nituya, a strong hand, an outstretched arm to make the Israelites go. So I think here that that it doesn't mean not even. I think it means except with a strong hand.
Yep.
Because it is with a strong hand that Pharaoh is forced to let the Israelites go, and it points out again the flexibility meaning of these various conjunctions and prepositions like ki, vi, lo, etc.
Especially the wow. The wow is extremely flexible.
Yep. And here in this case, lo is flexible. So contextually, we have to understand that given the fact that vav and lo and ki don't always mean the same thing, that we have to understand it from the context. So I would translate it there as except with a strong hand.
Yeah. Okay. And that's probably how the Masoretes understood it, because they have the lo separated with the tipacha from the biad hazakah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably how they were understanding.
What was that? They have it what separated?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. These are when you look in the Masoretic text, you have not only the vocalizations, but you have also the punctuation, which is often called cancellation marks, and they have three basic functions. The most important function of all is that it identifies the stress, which syllable has the stress, the accent. Then it also divides the clauses in the verse, so you can see where the clauses are. And while there's lots of rules as to how they're used, for the most part, they can be used for punctuation, like you have commas and semicolons and so forth in English to divide up the clauses in the English sentence so you can actually understand what's being said. When we speak verbally to one another, we make those pauses naturally. Okay, so you understand what I'm saying by the way I intone, the way I say and speak and make my pauses. But in written text, you can't hear me. And so you really need those punctuation marks so that you keep the meaning of the sentence. So, because depending on where you divide a verse, you can change the meaning of that verse. Okay. And so here the lo is actually a clause by itself. Basically, it has a what's called a disjunctive accent, which is where it makes it basically a pause from the last clause, which is the yad hazakah. That's the last clause of the verse, and that's together.
Okay, so it's more than just singing it, huh?
Yeah, it's more than just singing it.
No, you could say just the opposite. That the singing is meant to express the grammar. The singing is a way of basically of expressing the underlying grammar. Right? It's kind of a verbal way of expressing that underlying grammar.
Guess that's next to learn.
Okay, verse 20.
I'll take it too.
Okay.
Shalachati et yadi wehiketi et Mizraim beko nifle ota arsho ese bikre bo we achare ken yeshalach et ken.
Really good.
I will send my hand and hiketi, and I will strike Mizraim et Mizraim, and all Beko, and all Nifleota, and all marvelous works, or something like. I would do marvelous works.
All my wonders, with all my wonders, which I shall work in his midst.
Okay. Well, you said that part. And with Hare, and I know Hare is like after, and Ken is like, I know you said there's no yes in biblical Hebrew, so it's like therefore.
It's such. It means after such, or after that is done or is accomplished.
Yeah.
He shall send you out.
So they're okay. He should send. All right, cool. Next verse, or
if you want, that's no problem.
All right. Well, you could translate. I'll just read it so we can just move along. I want to hold it.
Okay.
That was 21.
Yep, we're on 21.
ונתתי אכן העם הזה בעיני מזרעים והיה כי תלכון לא תקלו רקם.
Yeah, and so I will set grace. I will set the grace of the people, of this people, in the eyes of the Egyptians, and it shall be that you shall go out, but you shall not go out empty. Rayqam. This is the same word that's used when you're supposed to appear before God at the 3 pilgrimage festivals. He says 3 times a year, all the males of the Israelites shall appear before me. And you shall not appear Rayqam, which means empty-handed. So actually, it's going to explain what it means here in this next verse. So if you want to read verse 22.
By the way,
if
you want, I have no idea what Robert Alter is going to say, but I pulled up the verse where he speaks about the name. So if you want, we could go through it.
Go right ahead.
He might defend you. I haven't read it yet, but
I don't care. I don't care either way.
Well, exactly. He says God's response perhaps gives Moses more than he bargained for. Not just an identifying divine name, the implication of offering one such name might be that there are other divinities, but an ontological divine mystery of the most daunting character. Rivers of ink have since flowed in theological reflection on and philological analysis of this name. The following brief remarks will be confined to the latter consideration, which in any case must provide the grounding for the former. I will be who I will be is the most plausible construction of the Hebrew, though the middle word asher could easily mean what rather than who, and the common rendering of I am, that I am, cannot be excluded. Will is used here rather than shall because the Hebrew sounds like an affirmation with emphasis, not just a declaration. Since the tense system of biblical Hebrew by no means corresponds to that of modern English, it is also perfectly possible to construe this as I am, he who endures. The strong consensus of biblical scholarship is that the original pronunciation of the name Yud-He Waw-He that God goes on to use in verse 15 was Yahweh. There are several good arguments for that conclusion. There's an independent name for the deity, Yah, which also appears as a suffix to proper names, and that designation could very well be a shortened form of this name. Greek transcriptions reflect the pronunciation close to Yahweh. In that form, the name would be the causative or hifil form of the verb to be, and thus would have the theologically attractive sense of he who brings things into being. All this is plausible, but is worth registering at least a note of doubt about the form of the divine name. Here, God instructs Moses to tell Israel, Ehyeh, I will be, has sent him. The deity, if the Masoretic vocalization is to be trusted, refers to himself not with a causative, but with kal, simple conjugate. I think he's talking about Ehyeh here, not Yehovah, but
this
could conceivably imply that others refer to him in the kal, third person, as Yehyeh, he will be. The medial Y sound in this conjugated form would have had, this in turn would make the name fit a common pattern for male names in the third person masculine singular conjugation. Imperfective form, Yitzchak, he will laugh, Yaakov, he will protect, or Yiftach, as you mentioned, he will open, and many others. If this were the case, then the name Yah could have been assimilated to Yehovah by folk etymology, and then perhaps even affected its pronunciation. Whether the pronunciation of this name later in the Hellenistic period, by then restricted to the high priest on the Day of Atonement, Yahweh, as indicated in Greek transcriptions, reflects its original sound, is at least open to question. The logic of Yehyeh, Yeh as the essential divine name would be that whereas particular actions may be attributed to humans through the verbal names chosen for them, to God alone belongs unlimited, unconditional being. This conjecture, inspired by the use here by God of the call conjugation rather than the causative conjugation, naming yourself, is far from certain, but it might introduce at least some margin of doubt about consensus opinion regarding the divine. In other words, he doesn't really know.
Yeah, that's the common.
Right.
Do me a favor, if you can look it up, the one I told you about, the Yehoshua in 1 Samuel 17:47. Well, I'm curious if he even mentions anything there.
He doesn't have a commentary on the Nach, only on the 5 books of Moses.
Oh, only okay. Yeah. I'm curious because I've pointed those verb forms out, many times in the past about how we have the close relationship to the different Semitic languages. You have Hebrew and Aramaic, Ugaritic, and of course Akkadian and so forth. And whereas Hebrew has a lot of features that dropped out in the formation of what we call Biblical Hebrew and later Hebrew, you see forms like the Yehoshua and so forth, where there's a leftover form where it was closer to how all the other ones were before that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it just shows you a connection of descent of the Semitic language, and it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, verse 22.
Ready?
Yep.
Way Sha'ala Isha. Oh, I'm reading on 22 or 22.
That's right. You're right.
Way Sha'ala Isha Mishkenta U Migarat Betar Keli Sef U Kele Zahav U Samalot We Samtem Al Benekim We Al Benotekim We Nizaltem Et Train.
Now, this is going to be a really interesting verse. It's something I've pointed out as well many times. Several features of this verse. It says, and a woman shall ask of her mishkinta, which means the person who dwells. That's like
Neighbor.
Either. Yeah. And also megarat beitha, which means the one who resides in her house. Articles of silver and articles of gold, as well as clothing. And you shall set them upon your sons and upon your daughters. And you shall. Now, this word here has often been used to mean plunder. You shall plunder the Egyptians. But I've also pointed out that the verb natsal has to do with saving. For instance, when you say hatzileni, which means save me, right? And whenever you see it here, although it's talking about you taking the wealth of the Egyptians, when we see, for instance, the labors of Yaakov, it used the same verb talking about the wealth that he brought with him from Lavan. Okay, and it says that he basically rescued his hire, which is what the complaint was that he had against his father-in-law when he met him at Gilgal. That's what Yaakov was pointing at. Said, look, you know how you were really dirty. You changed my wages so many times, and this is mine. You know? And so it says he rescued his hire, his wage, what he worked for all those years. Now you have the Hebrews also in Egypt as slaves working in these cities of storage for the Pharaoh. How long we don't exactly know, but it says now they're going to take the articles of gold and silver and clothing from the Egyptians, and it says when the Tzalatem et Mitzrayim, which means you shall basically strip away the wealth, but they're basically saving their hire. This is what they're getting back, what they've worked for for no money all this time.
I don't think I don't think the two are related personally. First of all, linatzel here is in the PL form, It's not in the nifal form, which is usually what nitzal would be, and I think that the other one you referred to would be in the nifal form, the passive form. And so here I think it specifically has the meaning to plunder. Even in modern Hebrew, linatzel means to take advantage of, or basically means to take advantage of. According to the BDB, Kal PL.
What's your boy Robert Alder say? I kind of like this guy.
Oh, he's very good.
I'm gonna have to find his books. You say he's got a commentary only on the Torah?
He might have some other commentaries on some of the books of the Tanakh. I'm not sure, but this was the big book that came out. Hold on, I can check what he says. One second here.
I'm gonna have to look up.
Where are we? We're in chapter. We're in chapter 3.
Yeah, the last verse, 22.
Right. 1 second, let me check. 3:22. 4. Sometimes it doesn't say. Each woman will ask her of her neighbor and the sojourner. Both neighbor and sojourner are feminine nouns. The verse reflects a frequent social phenomenon also registered in the rabbinic literature of late antiquity, in which women can constitute the porous boundary between adjacent ethnic communities, borrowers of the proverbial cup of sugar, sharers of gossip and women's lore. It must be said. Oh
my goodness, right.
It must be said that the situation in which Egyptian women are lodgers in Israelite houses does not jive with the plague's narrative, in which the Israelites live in a segregated region. Some readers have felt discomfort at the act of exploitation recorded here. Not me. The most common line of defense is that this is restitution for the unpaid labor exacted from the Hebrew slaves. In any case, it seems wise not to view the story in terms of intergroup ethics. From beginning to end, it is a tale of Israelite triumphalism. The denizens of the simple farms and the relatively crude towns of Judea would have known about Imperial Egypt's fabulous luxuries, its exquisite jewelry, and the affluent among them would have enjoyed imported Egyptian linens and papyrus. It is easy to imagine how this tale of despoiling or stripping bare Egypt would have given pleasure to its early audiences. So basically saying the Torah is fake and this was written much later, okay? And each par for the course for biblical, scholars, quote unquote. And each of the three sister wife stories in Genesis that adumbrate, I don't even know what that word means, adumbrate, the Exodus narrative, the patriarch and his wife depart loaded with gifts. The presence of that motif suggests that the despoiling of Egypt was an essential part of the story of liberation from bondage in the early national traditions. Well, he doesn't say much about it, but his translation is despoil, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the most common form of.
Yeah, he uses this, and you should despoil Egypt.
All right, hang on just a second. I got to get my my Bluetooth is dying, so I'm gonna have to change it over. So it might be a second before I can hear anybody.
All right. We'll just wait.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I got to turn the volume up. Ooh. All right. There we go. Okay. So now I can put this back where I want. So chapter 4, verse 1.
Waya'an Moshe Wayomer Wehin Lo Ya'aminu Li Welo Yishmeu Bekoliki Umru Lo Nir'a Adonai.
Yeah, Alecha Adonai. Yeah. And so Moses answered and he says, look, they won't believe me, and they won't listen to my voice, because they shall say, Yomeru. This is for they shall say, Adonai has not appeared to you. Lo nir'a elecha Adonai. Now it's interesting. I meant to talk about that earlier. Where was it? Yeah. In verse 18, where it says, Niqra alaynu. Yeah. we have, this is the same verb for that we see earlier. It says kara, usually with the hay, but we see it written also with the aleph. And it just means to meet, or it can also mean to happen, but usually it's to meet. And we see that this is a synonym with the word paga, the verb paga, which means also to meet. And that's what was used for Yaakov when he left out from his father. I think he was in Beersheba, and they left out, and he gets to which we know today is Bethel. It says somebody met him in the place, right? But it never explains who met him, and that's always a funny phrase. But anyway, that's all I want to get. So this is the appearance here, the Nir'a Alei. Verse 2.
Wayomer Elah na Maze Beyadeka Wayomer.
Yep. And so he says to him, so Adonai says to him, "What is this in your hand?" And he says, "Mate," which means a staff. Now, mate is also a synonym for shevet, which means a staff, right, or a rod. And it's also a synonym for the word mehukek. And it's interesting. Mehukek usually means a lawgiver. Shevet means a tribe. And also the word mate is used as a tribe. So it's not only that the staff represents something to walk with, but it represents authority.
Yeah, and I think the imagery there is that the elder is going to hold the staff, either as a sign of his his sign of his old age and wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or as a sign of power, right? In other words,
Yeah, it
like
says it calls it later the Mate Elohim, the staff of God.
Yeah, but in general, I mean, the reason that there's this overlap between the words for staff and these positions of power is that holding the staff is representative of authority.
Yeah.
Right, like kings will hold a staff in their hand.
Yep. It's also a sign of having the authority to correct, because usually the idea is that the rod of correction is by beating the child or the person, and we see this in the Proverbs where it says if you to spare the spare the rod.
I'm sorry. He who hates his son spares the rod.
Spares the rod. That's right.
Yeah.
And we have a prophecy somewhere. I can't remember where it is, but basically God promises to correct Israel with the rod of the nations.
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, it's always interesting that you have those words. You have, and also like you said, the elders. It's the elders of Israel who always have these walking sticks of authority, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, verse 3.
Wayomer Hashlikehu Arza Wayashlikehu Arza Wahi Le Nachash Wayanas Mushe Mipana.
Yep. Wayanos. Anytime you see the comments looks the same, but anytime you see a comments in a closed syllable that's not accented, then it's what's called the comments hatuf, and it's going to be pronounced like the whole oath. Wayanos. And so he says, cast it to the earth or to the ground, and so he cast it to the earth, and it became as a nachash. And so Moses fled from his presence. Now, this word nachash, you'll see later, is equated with tanin, and it's some kind of a serpent, whether it's a snake or whatever. We don't exactly know, but those terms are equated.
Mm-hmm.
In verse 4.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה שלח ידך ואחוז בזנח בו וישלח ידו ויחזק בו ויהי למטה בכפו.
And so Adonai says to Moses, send out your hand and grasp it by the tail. And so he sent out his hand and he took hold of it. And it became as a staff in his hand, in the palm of his hand. It became a staff.
Moving on.
Okay. Yep, verse 5.
למען יאמינו כי נראה אליך אדוני אלוהי אותה אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק אלוהי יעקב.
So this is the word lima'an, and normally that means because. But sometimes it is like here, it basically is showing a consequence of a prior action. And here the prior action is that he shows these signs. And so it's in order that they may believe that Adonai appeared to you, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
I got a question about my aunt, because I was wondering to translate that the right way. Because on the BDB I use, it just say purpose, like an intent, or like for the sake of, in view of, or an account of. Then I got for the purpose of, like things like that. So I was just wondering, like, what would be the proper way to translate that, or does it have to be used in like a certain type of context for it to be, it's like not one way to translate it.
Yes, context. It's context. It's bound to context. Here, you could say in order that, or so that, or something like that. But normally, it's identifying an intention, and it's usually as a result of some prior action.
Okay, so it's being done on purpose.
Yeah, it's the point being, you can say, the point being that they will believe that Adonai has appeared to you, and so forth. You have synonyms that have a similar meaning. You have ba'avor, then you have ba'atif, and you have I'm sure there's quite a few. I can't remember right now, but they have similar meanings. We translate it as because, so that, in order to, on account of, can be a good translation of it. It just depends on the context. Here, the idea is that there's for the express purpose that they will believe, and that's the point that he's giving him the sign.
Okay, understood.
Okay, verse 6.
Verse 6. Wayomer Adonai lo od habena yadka bechekweka wayabe yado becheko wayozea wahine yado mezoraat ka shaleg.
This is going to be an interesting one. And so Adonai says to him further, this is, I think you were the one that asked me about that earlier. Wayomer Elohim A'ud. What was that? That was verse 14. So it says, and so Adonai says to him further, bring your hand into your Hayqeka is usually translated as your bosom, which will be your breast area. And so he brought his hands into his bosom, and then he brought it out. And behold, his hand was Mesorat. Now, this is normally translated as some kind of leprosy, but we see when we get to Leviticus that it can't always be leprosy, because leprosy is a skin disorder, but we see the same word used for some kind of mold or whatever on houses and clothing. So it can't strictly be leprosy, but and that would have to be context related too. But here is some kind of an affliction, and whatever it was, it made his hand look like snow, kashaler, like snow, which means it was white. Any questions, comments?
Not there. Pretty
Okay.
simple.
And you see these types of words used, like when it says in Isaiah, it says even though your sins may be red like shiny crimson, okay, they will become white as snow. So it could be a sign of purity as well.
Yeah.
So it's context related. A lot of it, which goes against the idea. You hear this all the time that Karaites are literalists, but that's not true. We're contextualists because you can't always go by the literal meaning.
Yeah, cause I think I was just hearing about something about the other day, like, cause it's just like language, not even just Hebrew, all language period. It's just like all words are not meant to be taken, literal. I guess in context, in certain contexts and stuff like that. So
Yeah, whenever you have words like this, especially when they use the ka, which means like, or the preposition le, which means to, for, or as.
yeah,
Those are, I think, like, don't they call those similes when you use like and as?
mm-hmm.
And so that's all that is. Okay, verse 7.
Verse 7. Wayomer Hashem Yaka El Hekweka Wayashem Yado El Hekwo Wayozea Mechekwo Wehine Sheba Ki Saro.
Yep. And he said, "Bring your hand to your bosom." And so return your hand to your bosom. And he returned his hand to his bosom, and he brought it out from his bosom, and behold, it returned as flesh or as skin. So now we actually are in the fifth Aliyah, but it's already been 3 hours. So I'll read a few more verses, and then I'm gonna have to go.
Cool.
Yeah, I have to get going too myself because I have a presentation I have to give tomorrow. Actually, by the end of tonight. So, presentation. Yeah.
Homework.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. So verse 8. We'll read to verse 10, and then I'll have to go.
Sounds good.
All right. Wehaya im lo ya aminu lah we lo yishmeu lekol haor hari shon wehe minu lekol haor haor haron.
And it shall be, if they don't believe you and they won't listen to your voice, or they won't listen to the voice of the voice of the first sign, then they shall believe the voice of the last one, the last sign.
Which, by the way, doesn't really come true. Because what happens in the end is that the punishments against, or the oppression against the Israelites is increased, and then all of the Israelites basically start saying, complaining to Moshe, "You made the situation worse," right?
Yep. And they actually complained against Moses all the way up until the earth opened up and swallowed Korah and his group. And that ended the complaining, I think.
I never thought about it, but yeah, I guess it's either that ended the complaining or that's the last time it's reported in the Torah.
Well, yeah, I don't remember reading. It might be. I can't remember off the top of the head. But I do know it kind of mellowed out after that. You know, can you imagine the earth opening up and swallowing people and then shutting back up? I would never complain again.
Yeah, right. That would definitely scare the you-know-what out of me.
Yeah, I would never say a word, buddy.
Right.
Verse 9, yep.
Wahaya im lo ya'aminu gam lishne ha'otot ha'ele welo yishme'un lekoleka we lachakta mimen me ha'or we shafakta hayabasha we ha'u hama'im rasho tikwach min ha'or we ha'u ledam baya bashit.
Yep. And it shall be, if they also don't believe the second of these signs, and they won't listen to your voice, then you shall take of the waters of the Yaor, which is literally the river. You could say it means the Nile here. And you shall pour it out upon the dry land. Okay.
Which ends up being the first plague.
Yeah. And the waters shall become, or the waters that you take from the Yaor, they shall be as blood upon the dry land.
So Moshe does these, these two parlor tricks for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh basically laughs at him, right? And so then those aren't counted as plagues, but then starts the first plague where all of the water sources in Egypt turn to blood, and then Pharaoh laughs at that first plague too, because he has his Egyptian magicians repeat that plague. But this here is actually a mention of what will end up being the first of the 10 plagues.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too. When I wish I had more time, we can go through some of these plagues. But the first 3 of the Israelites actually had to go through those too. They experienced blood and water. They experienced what was the next one? Frogs, and then the flies, I think. Yeah. And then after that, God says, "I'm gonna make a distinction between the land of the Israelites, where the Goshen, and the rest of the Egyptians, and all this crap's gonna happen to you Egyptians, but nothing's gonna happen to the Israelites where they're living." And so that's interesting that they actually had to go through the first 3.
I'm not so sure that's 100% true, because in the case of the frogs, for instance, it mentions that it mentions the frogs were all over the land of Egypt, but I think it mentions specifically in Pharaoh's storehouses and in his
in the ovens.
Yeah, but I don't think I think maybe it says, starting with the 3rd plague, explicitly that the distinction will be made, but I don't know if there's any evidence that they actually had to go through the first 3. It's just maybe not mentioned. But anyway, we can worry about that when we get to it. Yeah.
Okay, last verse I'll take for today. Verse 10. Wait, Yomer Moshe el Adonai, Bi Adonai. Oh, actually, Bi Adonai. Lo ish devarim anochi. Gam mit mol, gam mishilashov, גם מאז דברך אל עבדך, כי כבד פה וכבד לשון אנוכי. And so Moses says to Adonai, please, my Lord, I am not a man of words, not yesterday or 3 days ago, and not even since you've been speaking to your servant.
Rather, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Rather, I'm heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. And chavav, pei, and chavav, lashon doesn't necessarily mean he couldn't speak, just that it was hard for him to speak.
Shy, maybe.
Yeah.
Or didn't feel himself being capable of speaking in front of a crowd or fulfilling this job. Two things to point out. The word tmol shilshom, gam itmol gam shilshom, is a common phrase in the Tanakh, and it basically means I never was. Okay, so it's used, for instance, in the case where the murderer accidentally murders someone, and it says that that this person did not hate the person yet, mitmol or shilshom, didn't hate him yesterday or the day before, and but it's a phrase that basically means at any time in the past. The other thing to point out is that mitmol, I don't know what the etymology of mitmol is, but the etymology of shilshom is from the word shalosh, which means 3, but it really means 2 days ago. And it gives interesting insight into the way that the time or the way that numbers were considered by the ancient Israelites, which it really means like today is considered the first day, mitmol would be considered day 2, and shilshom would be considered the 2 days ago. But it's counting the current day. So yesterday would be like the second day, and shilshom would be the third day before today, including today. So we see kind of different numbering system, and we see that a lot in various aspects of the Torah. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that when we were in Hebrew school as little kids, we always learned, and this is a famous midrash, that Moshe was lisped. He had a lisp, and that's what it means by kaved peh and kaved lashon. And they used to tell the story about how when he was in the house of Pharaoh as a child, Pharaoh was worried that Moshe had intentions to take over the kingship. So he did a little test on the baby Moshe, and he put hot coals, put gold on one side, and he put hot coals on the other side, and he saw which direction the baby Moshe would crawl to, and he was going to crawl to the gold, and then an angel changed his direction and made him crawl to the hot coals, and then he took a hot coal and put it in his mouth and became lisped ever since then. So it just goes to show how and these stories are actually, if you ask a typical Orthodox Jew, they will actually, for the most part, believe that actually happened.
I don't personally, but who might I say? We don't really know. Anything's possible,
Not that, but
well, I mean, I would believe an angel. So I was about to say I would believe an angel showed up and changed someone's direction than to say the earth opened up and swallowed somebody, or the seas opened up and they went through dry land. So that's possible.
It makes the point that the oral law is basically integrated together with the written Torah by rabbinical Jews into like a single body where everything is just true. And
it's like the book of Yashar. I've got it in Hebrew. I just actually got it. I'm reading through it for the first time, and the majority of it is just, for my opinion, it's all just nonsense. It's just a whole bunch of midrashic gook.
Right.
But anyway, you got some parts of it that's pretty much the same thing that the Torah says. But for the most part, even the words of the Torah have been changed. They actually changed phrases which actually have significant meaning in the changes that they use. But that's common in midrashic stuff. They always do that. Okay, so I apologize that we didn't get through the parasha, which we normally don't, but it's okay. It gives us lots to discuss, and that's really good. You can read through the parasha on your own. If you have questions, you can write either one of us on Facebook, in the comments on YouTube, or whatever. Send us emails. I'm gonna start including the emails on our live streams. Yeah. I'm post the email address for the World Alliance of Qara'im.
Oh, sure.
So they can do that. So Nicola asked if we have additional questions for the rest of the parasha, should we post them as a comment here on the Facebook video or under the YouTube video? It doesn't make any difference. We'll get them either way. We'll get notified, and one of us will do our best to answer the questions. But I would like to thank everyone for joining us and watching and participating. Thank you for coming on and reading and commenting. It's great to have cooperation, and I hope that this grows and we have more and more people jumping on the mic and sharing with us. So I would like to say Shabbat Shalom to everyone who's still in Shabbat, and Shavua Tov to everyone who is like us through with Shabbat.